live viewers, I hope you're able to follow us along. This is session 2, Gun Rights Policy Conference. We had to switch feeds because the old one was going to expire automatically at 8 hours.
Oh, no, not him again, right? I thought we just saw you. I'm Mark Walters, host of Armed American Radio, but you know that. A number of you, I know a lot of you have listened to my radio program or programs before over the last 6 years, and many of you approach me when I meet you at venues like this and say, love the show, love what you talk about, keep doing what you're doing, and that, all of that matters, and it means an awful lot, believe me, particularly as the show grows to close to 200 stations and now on in a daytime format. For those of you who might not have heard my program, I talk about the media a lot, and let me put it in perspective for those of you. I'll make it simple and sweet. I hate them. I can't stand them. They make me sick to my stomach, and I call them out every opportunity I get. I don't know of any other way to mince words. I do, but I'm not on satellite radio, so I can't really give them my real thoughts. Just the latest example was NBC News. I'm Catholic. Was watching a woman on NBC News. I don't know why I was watching it. She was talking about the Pope. And she says, isn't it wonderful that America finally has someone here, someone we've been longing for. We thought we had it in Obama, but now we have the moral authority here to help us through our suffering. And I thought, who the hell is suffering? You're not suffering. You got a West End apartment in New York City. I'm doing just fine, and none of you look like you're suffering. This is what they portray to us in a mainstream media. So the title for today's topic couldn't be more aptly named, The Gun Rights Battle, and it is exactly that. It's a battle, and it is being waged in the mainstream media. It's what I consider to be the media, if you look at it as an entity, to be the single most dangerous entity we face in this country today, and I mean that more than Bloomberg, because the media gives him a voice. The media controls the narrative, not only by what they tell us, but more importantly, by what they don't. What they leave out, what they don't want you to know, and what they don't want us to know. And that is incredibly dangerous and makes them it is a major combatant in this war that we're fighting. So now that you know where I come from there, we have an out-of-the-closet, unashamedly propaganda wing of the gun control movement being waged by what I can only refer to as the gun control jihadis. And they are jihadis because they are hell-bent on one outcome, and that's our destruction. The destruction of our right to bear arms, the complete demolition of it, and of our nation as we've known, as all of us have grown up in. Now acting as a metastasizing cancer known as the Progressive Agenda, headed by a junior tyrant in training in the White House. I say junior only because race-baiting, cop-bashing, Marxist, Muslim-sympathizing, socialist, community organizers can't be real tyrants when they want to go back to being community organizers. The guy's a rookie and he always will be, but he's very dangerous because he has the media on his side. I digress. The media is actively fighting each and every one of us in this room. You see, in this country, our freedoms allow for us to recognize and engage in vigorous debate with those with whom we disagree. It's part of who we are. It's part of our soul as a free nation. And it's a large part of what has made us the greatest nation on earth. An example. I can love guns. You can hate guns. You can explain your position to me and I can try to fix you because I think you're ignorant and broken. And should you decide to willingly remain ignorant, which is your choice, you have that choice as a free citizen. Free man or woman, you're free to make it. And I'll defend with my reputation and my life your ability to remain ignorant. But remember this, ignorance when left unattended breeds stupidity. And stupidity is a necessary ingredient for the progressive left agenda. They count on it and they rely on it. Don't forget that. So don't be that person. But when we disagree in America, we have to agree to end there. We have to agree to be willing to disagree in the end, and it has to stop there. I want to ask you a question, so walk with me. If you and I disagree, that's fine, isn't it? We can agree to disagree on certain things, whatever the topic may be. But the moment you cross that line and try to take from me what you disagree with, I believe that to be un-American. Do you? We've crossed that line. The media is now beyond disagreement with us. They're now actively fighting us. Battle is here. What do we do about it? I'll tell you what we do. We take it back. We take the media back. That's how we do it. You ever heard of that little radio show called Gun Talk? We do it every single time Tom Gresham airs, every Sunday on 200 plus radio stations for the last 21 years. That's how we do it. We do it every time Armed American Radio airs on just under 200 radio stations every Sunday. We do it every single time Armed American Radio Daily Defense airs every single day of the week. That's how we do it. We do it every single time the Polite Society podcast airs. We do it every time the black man with a gun, Reverend Ken Blanchard, opens his mouth and spills the truth. That's how we take back the media. We never, ever, ever let them get the last word. We answer them with letters to the editor, whether they print it or not. They read it. They know we're watching them. It doesn't matter if they print it. Yeah, we want them. We would like them to, because we want the masses to see it. But they saw it, and they're the ones that are pushing the agenda. We do it every time we talk to our neighbors and our friends, our families, our co-workers. We own it. We're right, they're wrong, and we loudly proclaim it. We don't back down. We're Americans. The debate ended December 15th, 1791, and we won the damn thing, and we need to let them know every single time we have that opportunity. Every person in this room does it when they write columns for magazines, when they write for the news organizations. You've got a great panel coming up. These guys are amazing. We do it by supporting those people, and we never let the enemies of freedom get the last word. We stay informed. Join their organizations. It's tough. Get on their mail list, and when you stop puking, it takes a while. But once you get past that gag reflex and you begin to see what the enemy is doing, you now know how to formulate your battle plans. What is the old adage? The general who knows the most about his enemy wins every war, every battle, and every war ever fought. Get on their email list. I'm on all of them. I hate reading them, but it is what it is. We take it back. That's how we do it. We take back the language that the un-Americans have hijacked. Phrases like common sense, gun safety. Still looking for that every town class, can't find it. Assault weapons, spraying automatic gunfire. You ever heard that one? We spread the truth. The Second Amendment to the Constitution exists. Remember this. We're not trying to add anything. They're trying to take it away. We already own it, and we remind them of that every chance we get. I'm happy to participate in this battle, and I'll do it with a vengeance. A commitment to give back to the enemies of freedom exactly what they're asking for and what they're giving us. And that's an unfair fight because they've earned it. And that's what we plan on doing, and I can feel her standing behind me, so I'll leave you with this. When it comes to the enemies of freedom waging war in the mainstream media, cloaked as objective journalists, each of us has an obligation to our nations and a responsibility to our families and communities to stop it by letting them know that we are awake, we are watching them, and we will never, ever, ever give up. You have to stay involved. So carry on, carry often, carry absolutely everywhere. Never leave your cave without your club, and never let there be a gun-free zone wherever you happen to be. Thanks, everybody. I'll see you on the radio.
That is the only lady who can make Mark Walters stop talking. I've been Mark's boss for about 3 years now, and oh look, there's a clock with numbers on it, so she can make me stop talking too. I love what Mark has to say, and I love the fact that he gets out here to support and make sure that everyone gets involved in this. And I am going to echo that sentiment and push it one step further. Something that I advocate every single time we put together an edition of Concealed Carry Magazine, or every single time we publish anything, is that the media is looking at us. Unfortunately, not today. There's one camera crew here. They don't really want to tell our story. But when something happens, they come out and they look at gun owners and they judge the entire group of gun owners by the activity of a few idiots. And we can't let that happen. I encourage every one of you to be the best gun owner that you can possibly be. Get training, understand the facts, and be able, like Mark said, to get out and talk about the facts reasonably and rationally. This is not something that we can stand up and scream and act like idiots. We need to convince people with the facts. And unfortunately, most of the media outlets in the country right now will go and look for the stupidest, most idiotic, biggest redneck in the world to put on TV. You've all remember it. I mean, what's the famous one? Sweet Brown. Ain't nobody got time for that. That's who they want on TV. But we need to come at it from a different angle. We need to make sure that we are doing everything right. There are laws out there and we're going to follow them. I'm very fond of saying there's a great big difference between what you are able to do and what you are allowed to do, but I would personally never advocate that you break any laws. But again, there's a great big difference between what you are able to do and what you are allowed to do. And I'm expecting and I'm hoping that everybody is able to be that best gun owner that you can be. If you're a member of a firearms club, a gun club, a sportsman's club, anything like that, invite the media to your club. Host a media availability day. Let them see what's going on at your club. Chances are they won't show up. I've hosted several in the past and invited as many as 15 media outlets to media availability days and gotten 2 or 3 media members to show up. If you are a firearms trainer, invite the columnists at your local newspaper and invite the editorial directors from your local TV stations for free training. Bring them out and let them see who we are and what it is that we do. Because when you look around this room, and you're the people who are most involved in this fight, when you look around this room, this is not Rambo and Terminator or anything like that. We are normal people. We are normal, everyday Americans who demand our right to carry. We demand our right to self-defense. And we are being portrayed as individuals who are trigger happy and just out there ready to kill. Is everybody familiar with the Maine beekeeper case? Have you heard about that? The man was convicted of murder because they explained that he got training, so that means he was ready to kill. He got his training so that he could kill someone. That's the kind of thing that we're trying to fight. And if we can just convince 1 or 2 people at a time, they don't want to listen to us, so we've got to get out there, we've got to be in front of them, we've got to get in their face, but we have to do it rationally and with all the facts. And again, the best gun owner that you can be, the person who's following all the laws, the person who is avoiding the fight. I will say it right now. If somebody's having a gunfight on Wednesday, I'm not going to be there. I don't want to be involved in a gunfight. None of us do. But that's the brush that the media is painting us with. Look at some of the things that they say. The biggest talk, the biggest problem we face in the media right now is the only discussion that we're getting from the media side is the danger and the damage that firearms do. And I'm very careful when I say this. The media says the danger and the damage that firearms do. Firearms don't do anything. Guns don't just jump up and start firing by themselves. Okay? We need to remind people of the good that good people with firearms can do. It's not the firearms, it's the good that the good people with firearms can do. And that needs to be the discussion that we have, is that we're out here to do something good. We're out here to defend ourselves. Defending ourselves, defending our family, defending people that we love, and all the things that we hold dear is something good. And if somebody wants to come and take it, yes, then we will fight for it. We have to do that because we just can't give up. That's really about all I have. Thanks a lot, Mark.
Hello, I'm AWR with Breitbart, and when they told us they're going to talk a little bit about the media, my immediate thought was to talk about the way the media approaches gun stories. It's going to dovetail perfectly with what Mark and Kevin have said here. And I want to say before I start, when I talk about the press or the media, I include gun control groups in that because Gabby Gifford, Mark Kelly, Shannon Watts, the whole gang, they can say whatever they want and media will not question it, but they will quote it. And they'll quote it again and again. It's part of the template. It's part of the mantra. So I can't separate gun control groups from the mainstream media when I look at these things. That being said, what I want to think about are 2 ideas. And I think it's important for every gun owner to recognize these things because the left tries to use emotion to overpower your reason, to overpower my reason, especially to overpower the reason of voters in certain districts. We have to understand the left loves to use partial truth and they love to use outright lies. There are a difference, but those are the two major things that they use when they report on guns. You want to look at a partial truth, think about this headline. September 14th, CNN reported on their own poll, this was the headline, guns, immigration, abortion, increasingly important to voters. Now, when you hear that headline, you're apt to kind of get uptight and you go, uh-oh, we're losing. Gun control is important to voters. That's what they want you to think. But if you get in the poll and you dig, round about the 7th paragraph, what do you find? You find the buried lead. You find the nugget that they should have framed the whole story around. I grab that nugget, I rewrite the article on the very same poll. Here's my title: Registered Voters Continue Revolt Against Gun Control. And that's the truth. If you look at their poll, here's what you see. And I want you to think about this, because if any of you haven't read this poll, it's going to shock you. 56% of registered voters on September 14th, 56% said passing more gun control likely will not keep guns out of the hands of the mentally ill. 58% said passing more gun control likely will not keep guns out of the hands of criminals. See, it's not just that guns are on the minds of voters, it's that the idea of keeping gun control away, that's what's on the minds of voters. That's what CNN didn't want you to know. That was their partial truth. So when you read these things, keep your eyes open. Don't go by their titles. Dig down in what they write and find what it is that they didn't want you to see, all right? That's the first thing. The second thing are the outright lies that the media tells. Mark Kelly and Gabby Giffords on September 21st, they tweeted numbers from the Center for American Progress. They tweeted numbers and made this claim. Now, this has a lot of numbers in it, so forgive me, but stick with me here. They tweeted numbers and claimed that between 1989 and now, 28 years, they claim that there have been roughly 836,000 deaths via gun violence. All right, that's in a 27-year period. Then they said, to try to show how shameful that is, they said, contrast that with every military death in America in every war that America's been involved in. They said that there have been 656,000 deaths in every war we've been involved in. Now, I want you to think about it again. 836,000 gun violence deaths in a 27-year period versus 656,000 deaths throughout American history in warfare. See, they want us to feel filthy and dirty. Our guns have killed so many people in 27 years. You have to be ignorant to believe this. There were 600,000 people killed in the Civil War by itself. Their number barely covers the Civil War. If I take the 600,000 killed in the Civil War, I add it to the 400,000, and that's a low number, 400,000 killed in World War II, I add that to the 115,000 killed in World War I, I'm already over 1.1 million. I haven't even counted the War of 1812, the Spanish-American War, Vietnam, Korea, Desert Storm, Iraq, Afghanistan, and we could keep going. Outright lies, but the goal is to shame you into keeping your mouth shut, to make you feel filthy for being a gun owner, to make you feel embarrassed. You might be the dangerous person. That's the goal. Their biggest lie of all, Mark and I talk about this on the radio all the time, the background check push. I'm sick of it. They use the Aurora Theater shooting. They use the attempt on Gabby Giffords' life in Tucson, and they use, most recently, the on-air shooting of the reporter and cameraman in Virginia. What do they not tell you? The Aurora Theater gunman, James Holm, passed a background check, right? Gabby Giffords' attacker, Jared Lofter, passed a background check, right? The Virginia gunman, Vester Flanagan, passed a background check, right? See, here's the bottom line. I contend for this all the time at Breitbart News. This is it. Over the last 15 years, it's harder to find a public attacker who did not pass a background check than it is to find one who did. You could test me on that. It's harder to find or name somebody who carried out a public killing with a gun, Harder to find that person who didn't go through a background check than find one who did. Yet they tell us what? We got to pass background checks. They'll make you safe. They'll make us safe. They'll make us safe. That's a lie. They won't make us safe, but they will allow the government to detect where every gun is, where every gun owner is, and to begin to form a registry that they can later use when the right person is in office. We just have to understand that. Now, how do we combat this? This seems very simple, but to me, it's this way. We have to know the truth. We're learning the truth today. We have to know the truth. And then think about this. We can't be ashamed of the truth we know. I can't let an emotional argument make me ashamed of truth. You remember John Adams, our second president, long forgotten by the left? Facts and evidence are stubborn things. We have to know those facts and we cling to them. And you have to leave this room today, this conference tomorrow, knowing this. Gun control will never be the answer. Never. And here's why. Because it has proven again and again to empower criminals while endangering innocent lives. That is a historical fact. Gun control will never be the answer to crime, rising crime, stagnant crime, any kind of crime you could think of. It'll never be the answer. A free citizenry, armed and able to defend their lives and their family, always will be. Don't let the media tell you anything else. Thank you.
I want to thank you. We are now back on schedule, so you gentlemen, I hope, will be available for questions later this afternoon. Now we're going to take a very short break. I want to remind you about the book signings, and I want to tell you that in the last 2 times I've mentioned it, I have neglected to mention 2 authors who I work with very closely. That's Dave Workman and Alan Gottlieb, also are able to sign books. So if you would go on out, take a very, very quick break and be back in here, and David Hardy is going to talk about Heller and McDonald. Thank you.
Okay, we are back at Gun Rights Policy Conference. I want to thank everybody that followed us over. We had a little bit of an issue. Apparently, Google Plus and YouTube limit our live broadcasts to 8 hours. So we had to change feeds, and thank you to everybody. And there are quite a few of you that did make the switch, come over and see us through live. This is, of course, Gun Rights Policy Conference. We are just after the media presentation up there. All our mics should be live, guys. What did you think of the session after lunch?
I thought it was fascinating. Can you pop me up? I thought it was fascinating. I mean, think of what the media says. What's the old joke about a guilty child? It wasn't me. I didn't do it. It was somebody else. And if it happened, it wasn't my fault. Well, we've got a media that's telling us self-defense isn't necessary. And, oh, well, okay, in those cases when it is a necessity, you should have been a victim rather than a victor.
What do you think, John?
Well, I enjoyed all the people we had. Of course, I like the lawyers. I really like that last quote from A.W.R. Hawkins, that it is harder to find a mass shooter who did not go through a background check than to find one that did.
The only exception that I could think of was Sandy Hunt.
And that's because he killed his mom.
Well, right. He just murdered his way to a firearm.
That's right.
Well, joining us, joining us, stepping in here is
Cheryl Todd.
Cheryl Todd. Thank you. I'm sorry.
That's
It's been
okay.
an awful day for
Crazy
me.
day. Yeah.
Cheryl, you have a radio show here in Arizona with your husband,
Yes.
and you're going to be speaking tomorrow. First of all, tell us about your radio show.
Well, it's brand new, really, and we're on the Salem Network, which in the Phoenix area is 960 AM. It's KKNT, and we're called Gun Talk AZ. And so we are the newest local gun talk show, and what we like to say, we're trying to reach that middle space. There's a lot of angry voices out there, You know, we need to be angry, but there's a lot of things to be angry about. But for us, our personality is just about educating and informing. And so we're always looking for the people to, they haven't decided yet. They don't know where they lie on the spectrum.
You want to talk to your neighbor.
I do want to talk to my neighbor. And for us, it's about opening up dialogue, which creates relationship. And through those relationships, sometimes people discover, guns just really aren't for me. They don't fit in my life. And if you are that self-aware, we high five you. We love that about you, because if they don't fit in your life, that's going to help us be safe and responsible and protect our rights.
But even to ask your neighbor to think that through, that's a step for a lot of them.
Well, it is, because I think so often all we do is just, absorb other people's words. We just let it wash over us. But if we cause people to engage in critical thinking, now they go, now, wait a minute. I don't know that I believe that guns are evil. I mean, I don't believe that, because lots of lifesavers use guns. So how does that then fit into my paradigm?
Isn't that funny? And you use the word lifesaver.
Yeah.
If bad things happen, who do we call a lifesaver?
911, right? The first responders. And honestly, let me just take that word. I like to say that we should be our own first responders and,
Right.
and let them be our backup. Because sometimes, very often, things happen so suddenly. There's no time to even get to the phone, to pick it up, to call 911, to tell them your address, to tell them what's going on. I mean, things happen in an instant. And if we can be safely and responsibly armed, then we can help protect even the first responders' lives, even the police personnel's lives, so they don't now have to step into all this.
Yeah, one thing we say on our show all the time: the average response time nationwide is 10 minutes
Yeah.
to 911
Yeah.
from the time you push the button to send the call.
Yeah.
10 minutes, and that's assuming perfect circumstances.
Yeah.
An exercise, I haven't said it on the air for a long time, but one of the exercises I like to tell people to do, and I always tell when I'm speaking in public: look at your watch. If you got a second hand on your watch, or watch the seconds on the digital display go by, watch the watch for 10 minutes.
It's an eternity.
Amazingly long time.
It is.
I had a guy who would make fun of me. He goes, most people, adults, couples, sex only lasts about 7 minutes. I go, great. So what we should do is call the police, go have sex, and by the time they show up, we'll be done.
There it is,
I
right?
hadn't quite thought of it that way.
Be done or dead.
Okay,
Oh,
then.
there's a new marketing plan. I like it. Press this button.
How did I get in this conversation? What happened?
So you're going to be, among the other things that's going on, you're going to be speaking tomorrow. You're going to be up there with our own John Richardson.
Yes, I am so excited. I'm so honored that they asked me to speak, because, like I said, our show is new, and it's so empowering that they have invited me to speak in front of this panel. I'm very passionate about the topic. I feel like I have a lot to share, but one of the things I'm going to talk about is that, like Bill Gates said, the future of leadership is in empowering others. Well, I'm feeling empowered. I'm going to go on my radio show. I'm going to help empower others, and we're just going to set that ripple on its course to hopefully be a tidal wave.
Tell me about your audience.
Our audience, well, very conservative, of course, because being on the Patriot Radio, they are a very conservative audience, and I think a lot of them are already bought in to the whole idea of Second Amendment rights and your constitutional rights. But what we're hoping is that we're going to get them so engaged that then they are going to go and talk around their kitchen tables, talk at the water coolers. It's going to be top of their mind. Hey, I heard this thing on the radio the other day, and it's just kind of bubbling inside of me. And then they're going to maybe reach that middle space, the next generation. And it's really the next generation that I'm so actually kind of concerned about, worried about. My daughter's 25. She thankfully gets it. But so many of the younger people in her generation, they just, whatever MTV tells them to do, they're all about that. And MTV is definitely not going to tell them to support their Second Amendment rights.
No, it's not.
So does your show as well as being on the air? Are you streaming? Can people catch your show on the internet?
We are podcasting recordings on SoundCloud, on guntalkaz.com. We put every recording on there, so please check us out.
Absolutely. Well, we've got a lot of things going on, but I do absolutely want to thank you, Cheryl, for stopping by, coming in and talking to us.
My pleasure, my honor. Thank you for having me.
No, before you leave,
Yes.
what hours are your show on? When is it?
1
when is it?
p.m. on Saturdays.
1 p.m. Saturdays, Pacific time.
Yes.
Good. It's a big world. Let them know.
Thank you.
Thanks, Cheryl.
We're going to be having another guest step in here in just a second, but while we're waiting, Rachel, what did you think of the afternoon session?
I really appreciated what the media guys had to say about how to deal with the media, how to deal with gun stories in the media. A couple of sound bites that I grabbed. Inviting the media out to events. We've done that some in Texas, and every single time we do it, we have great success. And so I need to remember to invite them out. I also want to remember to invite them out to training classes. We've done that just a couple of times, and every single time it's been fantastic. So I want to do that more. I believe we have another guest with us.
We do.
We have joining us right now.
Paloma Campana.
Yes. And Paloma, you've heard her if you've been watching, and you seen her speak up on the stage. I want to thank you for coming in and agreeing to interview with us while we're on break here.
Oh, well, thank you so much for the invitation. I appreciate it.
Of all the places to do missionary work, you chose New York.
It feels that way. I have not heard that word used before, but amen to that.
But it's worth redeeming because it's not a lost cause. There is a vibrant gun culture in New York.
There is. The way to think about New York is that we are two essential cultures, the Hudson River going west and the easternmost tip of Long Island and everybody else. And where we are in the upstate region, the Second Amendment is alive and well. There are activists everywhere kicking and screaming and making their presence known.
And yeah, it's like Manhattan is making all the activists you need.
What happens for us really is that we have a governor who is from Queens. We can blame it on the city, or we can simply blame it on the governor. There are certainly any number of people who are in a chokehold under more onerous regulations in New York City, even than the rest of the state. So just from a policy perspective, the governor should not have enacted the SAFE Act in 2013, just looking at New York City and knowing that the incredible level of gun control in New York City was not reducing its crime rate. There's no direct corollary
Just
there.
an abject failure.
Absolutely. And so you would think that the governor might even learn something from New York City. You think Bloomberg might learn something from New York City. Oh, what the radio audience is missing is your facial expression there.
Would you talk about the Amish again? That was such a I was struck by it, literally struck. I went, wow, we disarmed a segment of our populace who are absolutely innocent of, okay.
They're pacifists.
Speak up. Let me see the show of hands who of those of you worried about the big Amish crime problem. No, okay, in the back, no, it's something else. Okay, tell us about it again.
Sure. The Amish now in the state of New York are unable to buy firearms on either the primary or the secondary market. So let me break that down. All of us who own firearms run through a background check at our local FFL using Form ATF 4473. One of the things that happens during that process is we present photo ID. The Amish do not allow photographs to be taken. To do such a thing could result in their excommunication or shunning from their religious community.
Which is a very big thing in the Amish community.
It absolutely is. So there came a point in the evolution of Form 4473, which did not always require a photograph, that they became excluded from the primary commercial market for firearms. New York State in January 2013, as part of the SAFE Act, now requires background check for private purchases. The ATF did begin reporting those statistics, so about 75 people a month total in the whole of the state of New York actually participate in that process. That means that the Amish then became subject to filling in ATF Form 4473 at an FFL on the secondary market as well. So they cannot now buy a used long gun from a neighbor or someone who's a friend of the community. And indeed, when you speak with the Amish and persons who may be friends who maybe had even given them a used shotgun or rifle in the past, each of the two communities I represent are now down to one friend who might be willing to do so to become a co-plaintiff in a lawsuit. The other key here, though, that is a fact most people don't know, is that the Amish are willing to be fingerprinted. So the point that I was making was that a fingerprint is a more unique identifier than a photograph, which frankly, I have the technical skills to alter at home using simple Photoshop. Whereas the fingerprint is so unique that it was a superior form of identification. I hear where the feedback's going to come on that. You would think both the ATF would say yes to the fingerprints, and then they would say, oh yeah, everybody should provide a fingerprint on the 4473. So we got to watch that slippery slope in between looking for an exemption or special process for the Amish on the basis of religion and not wanting to start a trend for all firearm purchases on a national basis.
Right.
So stay tuned.
Now, you were saying the Amish themselves did not participate. They did not want to sue based upon themselves. So you had to find a
Correct.
co-plaintiff.
So part of what we're having to do is that in the history of the United States, the Amish have never sued. Most people do know the case of Wisconsin versus Yoder, which is the public school education case. They were actually defendants in that case. And indeed, here, my clients have asked me the question, well, should we go ahead and get arrested? The situation on the ground in New York is so bad that I do not want them in that configuration. It would be either a misdemeanor or a felony. I don't want them going to jail. You cannot control what a judge will do. The only thing I can control is my submissions. Trying to do good research, get them in on time, show up for oral argument and not be late. You know, I can't control what a judge would do. And we really have a situation where some judges are going to bat for the Second Amendment and others are completely shutting us down. So it's really too precarious to risk that.
I have to ask you to comment on your profession. How does that feel when nominally looking at the same black letter law and in fact the same case law, and yet you have judges bringing such strong prejudices that you really in some cases have no hope of justice?
I never lose hope of justice. We have
The guy could be sick that day.
We have a system, though, within the judiciary that allows for appeals. We have a system within the judiciary that is adversarial. So the state does also have to show up and present its argument, and we lay a record that I get a chance to refute. One of your colleagues was quoting former President Adams. You know, the facts and the truth are stubborn. We have the facts on our side. We have the Constitution on our side. What we don't necessarily have on our side right now are the laws. But we have the power to change that, and we can change it through the judiciary.
So it sounds like you found a way to keep hope.
Absolutely.
Keeps you going.
Absolutely. Right. We have three branches of government.
Yes.
We've been active in many states, not just New York,
Right.
in lobbying our governors and in
Right.
booting them out of office, right? Case
Right.
in point, Connecticut. We have done well with pulling legislators out of office every 2 and 4 years. Hallelujah.
Yes.
But really, the Second Amendment has been asleep from its point of ratification in 1791 until the Heller decision.
Right.
It's brand new. So really, every case is writing new law. There isn't precedent, which is perhaps one of the reasons judges are as uncomfortable with our cases as the subject matter. We're asking them to make decisions that are going to be on the books.
They can't lay on a large, long-standing list of examples.
They can't. And when you think about it, from the first moment we enter law school to
That's
be
what
trained, that's what they're pounding into us. And that's where I suppose to some degree I'm the oddball, even on the panel today. I love a blank piece of white paper. Like, I know there's precedents. I quote them. Okay, great. But if somebody's going to tell me there's an opportunity to influence how the Second Amendment is
seen, interpreted.
Oh, sugar, I'm there. I don't care if you're paying me or not. Well, some 308 on barter is always good. But
I'm there. Let's do that. But that creative stroke, if you will, is really something that we need to find more of in the legal community.
I would think most cases are more realistically a combination. You'll take all the precedents that you can find and
Perhaps.
deliver, and here's where you have to get a little creative to highlight the unique aspects of a case.
Sure. And when we look for those cases where the intersection of the Second Amendment and the rest of the Bill of Rights, that's really where we're going to get the decisions that impact our daily life.
Where do people find out more about you and your cases?
Website law-policy.com, or just give me a ring, 585-377-7260. Happy to hear from you. Thank you so much for your support.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. We're going to go back to the stage.
At the end, bring you your thumb drive, or even better, 4 or 5 of you bring you laptops or notebooks. I'll give you a thumb drive. We'll upload the whole conference to you guys, and then you guys will help me distribute them to the whole audience. They'll also be posted on libertywatchradio.com. That's libertywatchradio.com on the GRPC tab on the left margin. Those will be posted probably by Monday night. They'll be posted. Again, libertywatchradio.com on the GRPC tab in the left margin, or bring me your thumb drive. My preference is bring me your thumb drive tomorrow. You'll each have it. You guys can give it away all you want. It is free, and a few people to help me with laptops distributing it would be greatly appreciated, but not until the end of the conference. Thank you.
Ladies,
Yeah. I don't plan on recording it. You're on.
ladies and gentlemen, could I have you to take your seats, please? And if you see people outside the door, pull them in. One of the really wonderful things that I get to do and have been able to do over these last many years is work with some of the very best and the very best and the very brightest and the people on the cutting edge of Second Amendment legal issues and scholarship. And one of those people is David Hardy. And I've been working with David for 25 plus years. And it is my very, very distinct pleasure to be able to have this book so that you can all have this book this year. This was probably the first book that really ever talked about the historiography of the Second Amendment, and it really was critical to the whole concept of the individual right becoming more discussed and more researched and more debated. So I would like to give the mic to Dave. Thank you.
Glad to be here. I was actually sort of a homecoming. I was born here in Phoenix, and my father was born in Yuma, and my grandfather was born in Cave Creek, just north of here, Cave Creek, Arizona territory. So I do go back a little ways. I also go back a little ways in the Second Amendment conflict, the individual versus the collective rights type view. I've been attending these conferences now, it's a little shocking to add it up, but 39 years. I spoke at the first one back in 76, was it? I think it was 76, back when they were called the Academics Conference. The reason they were called the Academics Conference was this was at the very gestation of the Second Amendment individual rights view. And so Second Amendment Foundation had the idea of a much smaller conference, maybe a couple of dozen people, getting together who'd published in the field or might be publishing in the field in the near future, and having them meet, talk, share their ideas. Really, the development of the Second Amendment up to the current day has gone through 4 stages, and I'll talk primarily about the first because the last 4th stage is really the subject of the rest of this conference. Back in the early days, and now we're talking 1970s, I brought out one of the first law review articles on the topic. I still have my copy, 1974. Back in those days, there were a number of us publishing on the Second Amendment. Joyce Malcolm, Steve Halbrook, myself, and there were a few others, David Kaplan, Bob Dowlett, and some others. We were publishing in the minor law reviews. And I'm talking Northern Kentucky, Chicago, Kent. We were doing the research, we were finding the critical facts and historical evidence, but we couldn't break into the big name reviews. But over about 12 years, really up to 1986, we laid out the evidence. In 86, the movement entered its second stage, which was when Don Cates managed to get an article in the Michigan Law Review summarizing all of the data that had been brought up. Now, within the legal academic hierarchy, Don was not a big name, but Michigan was a big name law review. The big names in constitutional law were not going to be reading Northern Kentucky or Chicago, Kent, but they would read Michigan. Generally, depending upon who does the rating, it's rated somewhere between number 6 and number 8 in the country. And then we started attending the Second Amendment conferences, as I say, back in 76. You should have seen it. Back then, Steve Halbrook and I were in our 20s. Don Cates, in his early 30s, was sort of the old man of the group. I mean, we were all a bunch of youngsters trying to start a movement. As a result of Don Cates' Michigan Law Review publication, though, the views that had been generated and the evidence that had been generated did come to the attention of the big names in American constitutional law. The first one of which was Sandy Levinson, professor of law at the University of Texas, very well respected, and like most of the people who would follow, very liberal generally. And he published his article entitled The Embarrassing Second Amendment, which was on the theme of how can we treat the Second Amendment in a way that we haven't treated all the other cases arising under the Bill of Rights. There's no ethically principled way we can be doing what we are doing. And he was swiftly followed by William Van Alstyne, then of Duke, now of William and Mary, Akhil Amar of Yale, the big name in 14th Amendment academics. Finally, even Larry Tribe of Harvard, way out on the left, in the second edition of his constitutional law treatise, finally had to admit that there was a lot of evidence for the Second Amendment as an individual right, although, as he put it, of uncertain dimensions. So at that point, we finally had the big names mustering behind a bunch of very small-time people who'd done the original research. And at that point, it moved into litigation. Now, you've got to understand that within the Second Amendment movement generally, there had been thoughts of litigation going back into the 1990s. At one point, there was a conference specifically designed along the lines of what are we looking for in the Second Amendment test case. And it was interesting because the group, it was called by then NRA President Bob Corbin. The group split down very nicely. All the litigators wanted to go for it, and all the academics were saying, no way, no way. Well, with one exception, who is present here today, Joe Olson, professor of law, and he was for going for it, provided we did some additional groundwork. Other than that, it split perfectly, and needless to say, nobody did anything. And then after some years, along came an interesting group of people. Alan Gura, who you've heard and I believe will hear from today quite a bit. Bob Levy and Clark Neely, who did put together the test case. A small team of people, well-motivated, carefully planning on their own without major organizations having some grand battle plan. And that was the plan that finally came through. I can tell you, up through 2000, maybe 2005, I would never have believed that I would be standing here speaking to a conference, the whole subject of which revolved around where is the Second Amendment going in court. because up to that point, the Second Amendment was going nowhere in court. And no one really had an idea of where to take it in court. And today we're looking at the fruit of all this work that has gone over for about 40 years that finally came down to the point when we can debate those topics and those tactics. You know, first time I spoke on this subject, it was North Carolina, not far from the site of the Battle of Kings Mountain, 1780, American Revolution. And I always thought there was a certain comparison to be drawn there. What happened at Kings Mountain was not George Washington with his plans or his strategy or anything else. In fact, it wasn't any one leader. What happened was that Major Ferguson of the British Army had supposed to sweep inland, get the over the mountain men to the British side, sent out an ultimatum that unless they swore allegiance to George III, they would be visited with fire and sword. Well, he didn't know the men he was dealing with. The over the mountain men didn't like that very well, and they didn't respond very well to that mode of persuasion. There was no grand plan. Nobody hatched an overall strategy or anything else. It's just that about 1,200 of them got hacked off, took their rifles and their horses, and went eastward looking for this Major Ferguson who thought he could talk to them like that. And as they went along, they didn't know anything about military arts. The total amount that they knew was that there was a unit called a company of roughly 100 or more men, and its commander was a captain. So as they coalesced coming down the roads toward Kings Mountain, when they got up to about 100 men, they elected a captain. I had an ancestor in Captain Sever's company. And eventually they caught up with Major Ferguson. And they went in with no organization higher than a captain. The battle plan was basically the captains put their heads together and decided to go up the hill. But at the end of the day, Major Ferguson's detachment had ceased to exist, and the western end of Cornwallis's offensive had just gone to pieces. Well, that's how it was in 1780. And I can tell you, 1970s, 1980s, 1990s, that was how it was with the gun movement, the Second Amendment movement. There was no overall plan. There was no overall system of command. It was just a bunch of individuals, Joyce Malcolm, Steve Halbrook, later Alan Gura and company, all fighting on their own hook, all reaching the best plans that they could without any coordination. It was a mighty rugged way to do battle. On the other hand, we took the hill. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Again, this is the book. It's concise, it's informative, and please, everybody read it, and we'll try to make Dave's hand sore signing. Thank you very much.
Are we on the next panel?
And the next panel is about reversing school disarmament. Jim Irvine is president of the Buckeye Firearms Foundation, and he's going to explain the program that they have initiated there, which can be copied in many states. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. OH. All right. My name is Jim Irvine. I know many of you know me through Buckeye Firearms Association. Today I'm here speaking on behalf of our foundation and a program we call Faster Saves Lives. In a nutshell, it's our teachers, principals, our secretaries and coaches, and yeah, even our lunch ladies carrying guns in our schools to protect our kids from bad people. outside raising my kids, this is by far the neatest, most exciting, most gratifying thing I have ever worked on in my life. So I'm going to briefly tell you about what the program is and then how you can implement it in your home community. John Benner of Tactical Defense Institute is the person who put our program together for us. He's a career law enforcement officer. He's pioneered all kinds of things, an instructor in the national level at school resource officers for over a decade. He's been working on this for over 15 years. I've been working on it for a number of years. But he said to me, he goes, I realized I was training the wrong people. It's not the cops I need to train, it's our teachers, it's our educators. But no one would listen. Sandy Hook opened the door. Now all of a sudden people would listen. They would, even people who were anti-gun, that killing was so horrendous that they were willing to take a look at anything, and it opened the door for us. So in the days after that, we announced that we would do a class for 24 educators. We would pay for everything, the tuition, the ammunition, the meals, the hotels, everything. A lot of media scrutiny. I was mocked. Teachers don't want to carry guns. Do you even think 24 people will sign up for your training? Well, after a couple of weeks, we had over 1,000. I'm here to tell you, going through those applications changed my life. It really did. People from all walks of life, but in education, understand, I mean, everybody knows a bear's the fiercest creature in the woods. Mama bear's the fiercest creature in the woods, right? Goose will die for her goslings, but no cat dies for another cat's kittens. But those ladies at Sandy Hook died, not for their kids, but for our kids. They stepped in front of a firing AR rifle to try and protect their kids. Who in here is brave enough to do that? That is what our educators did. How can you not be impassioned about helping people that will die for your own children? That is who we're talking about. So the class, it's a 3-day class. You've got to have a concealed handgun license. If that's all the training you have, we've instituted a primer class because it's a very intensive 3 days, and we find people do a lot better if they've had some other training. Starts out with mindset. If you don't understand a problem, it makes it hard to solve it. Especially in law enforcement, we look at these active killers as criminal events. And certainly they're criminals, but not like we think of it. A criminal, I'll rob from him to buy drugs from her. There's a means to an end. With the active killers, that is the end. This is the culmination of their entire life is on event day. There is no after. And they're cowards. And the combination of that's why we see so many suicides at the end of it. Understanding that helps you implement solutions that will be much more effective at stopping this killing. So yeah, a lot of shooting too. In 3 days, we'll shoot 800 to 1,000 rounds. That gets a lot of attention. They've got to be good shooters. But it goes a lot beyond that. We've got to know how to interact with people in a dynamic environment. We teach them how to be hunters and how to be ambushers because different times and different situations are going to require those different skills. And then on day 3, we test them. We use force-on-force training to put everything we've trained into use. And I'm an airline pilot. When I took off yesterday with 180 people sitting behind me, I've never had an engine failure in real life. But I and the people behind me had confidence I could deal with that situation because I've trained for it in a simulator. Well, force-on-force training is a simulator for gunfights. And I have that same confidence in our educators that have gone through this program. Yeah, they can act responsibly and stop these events and this chaos and deal with it appropriately, having gone through this training. And what's more important is they know they can. They do it successfully. They make mistakes, they learn from them, and they go forward empowered. So the last thing we do is we have them shoot the law enforcement qualification course. It's a waste of time as far as training goes, but it's incredibly powerful to be able to present to the school board a sheet of paper that says I passed the same qualification as our law enforcement officers. Now we make them pass at a lot higher standard because the law enforcement test is insanely mediocre and dumbed down. So we make them perform at a higher standard. The other thing we make them do, really important part of this training that doesn't get enough attention, is some medical care. We do an abbreviated TC3 class. It's Tactical Combat Casualty Care. Essentially, stop the bleeding and keep them breathing. You need tourniquets, compression bandages, and chest seals. And we teach them how to use them appropriately and how to prioritize the patients on treating them and get it done. So that's the class in a nutshell. We now do a level 2 class. we bring them back, and some shooting, but a lot more scenarios, much more complicated scenarios that really stress them out. And then we finished up with in-school training on a third year. It's something we've implemented this year, where we train in the schools, not just with the staff that have gone through this training, but other staff, because we'll teach them the TC3 stuff. And then in the scenarios in the schools, we've got some people stopping the killers, and we've got other people having to respond and do the medical treatment, because that's the way it's going to play out on event day. And also include local law enforcement, and not just your city or sheriff, but the surrounding agencies, because on event day, they're all coming. So why don't we all train together? And what we've seen is the bonds that take place on this are amazing, because the teachers see that the cops are not some Jedi guys with Yoda type skills that solve all the problems perfectly. They make mistakes. And the cops see the dedication in the teachers and how good they perform, and they form that bond. And the other thing, the law enforcement, especially even SWAT guys, realize, hey, some of the tactics that are being taught here are superior to what we've been using in our team. And so they start upgrading things. And by the end of that second day in the schools, you've got a responding law enforcement officer coming down a hallway, linking up with the school administrator, using partner tactics to solve their problem down the hallway. And now they're not a cop and a teacher anymore. They're teammates. They are friends. They've exchanged emails and phone numbers, and they have a lifelong bond. And what comes out of this is relationships and further training to keeps getting better and better year after year. To the point we have one school that worked with their local law enforcement. Law enforcement came to the school and said, can you help us with this problem? The school helped them solve a murder that was actually a national case in under half an hour because of the relationships that happened. This is where you want your community to get to. So how do we get there? When you talk to first of all, you need a law that lets you play ball. Most states have a law that prohibit guns on schools, but there's exemptions. Law enforcement officer in the course of their duties, in school sanctioned events. Ohio and many other states have something like, or any other person authorized by the school board. There's your keys to the palace. If you don't have that in your state law, start working on it, because you're going to need it. You're not forcing this down anyone's throat. You're giving local control to your school boards to follow the expert advice of experts. So don't force those that don't want there. Work with those that will work with you first. When you start talking with schools, start with the medical stuff. I irritate a lot of people.
This place is going to the dogs.
When you start with the school people, don't start with guns, because it scares too many of them. And then that's the name FASTR actually is an acronym. That stands for Faculty and Administrator Safety Training and Emergency Response. Why? Because as Alan Corwin has told us for decades, words matter, and they do. You can win this argument if you phrase it properly. Start with medical stuff. The schools need trauma kits in them. Compression bandages, tourniquets, and chest seals, and people know how to use them. If you ask your schools, do they have them? Most of them will say, well, we've got first aid kits, which is good. You got a lot of boo-boos, you need a lot of Band-Aids, but you need a trauma kit. You need these things. For those of you who still think a tourniquet causes a loss of limb, it does not. 100 years of teaching, our medical community says, hey, we've learned some things. Bottom line is you put on a proper tourniquet applied properly in hours, reasonable amounts of time, never caused a loss of limb. It's a myth. Get rid of that. So get this stuff in the schools. Then talk to them about what they face. Everybody understands if somebody has a heart attack in a school, we're going to call 911. We need an ambulance. But you're going to get that AED off the wall, and you're going to hook those pads up, because if you don't do it and restart that heart, by the time the ambulance gets there, the patient's dead, and there's nothing we can do. The faster we take some action, the more lives we save. Faster saves lives. It works the same way in an anaphylactic shock and putting the EpiPens in. It works the same way if you have a fire and a fire extinguisher. Our police, we want a faster response times. Faster saves lives. We all get this. So in our medical care, we need to be able to stop the bleeding from shop accidents, hand through a window, bleacher collapse, whatever it is. They've got to have these tools, and they've got to act fast to stop it. But there's a problem. I can't start administering first aid on people if there's somebody in the room that's continuing to shoot them and me for screwing up their plan to kill a room full of them. So you've got to have a reliable way to stop the killer. And that's where they need the armed staff. And schools will tell you, hey, this is not our problem, this is law enforcement. It is not. This is a school function. Look, I tell the educators, the vast majority of your school staff does not want anything to do with carrying guns. And you don't want them carrying guns, and nobody wants to train them. We're all on the same page. But every one of those buildings has got a couple people in it who are already gun owners. They've already got a concealed handgun license. They're already going to the scene of the fight, just like those girls did in Sandy Hook. They're already going there. So how about we give them the tools and the skills to win that fight when they get there, to end the violence, stop the killer, treat the injured, hug our children, and send them home to us at the end of the day. That is what we all want. That is what this program is about. If you have staff that is literally willing to die, you owe it to get involved and help get them the tools and the skills and the resources. There's two keys to making this work. One is you got to have the right people. Let the school boards pick them. Let the superintendents and the principals pick their people. They know them better than we do. And then you need good training. In Ohio, we're blessed. We've got world-class trainers. John Benner and Chris Serino do our training for us, so they get world-class training. And the question is, who pays the tab? And the answer is our foundation does. We've spent over $400,000 in the last 3 summers training our educators on this stuff. And it is growing like wildfire. It is a runaway freight train, and it's not just Ohio. We've trained multiple other people in multiple other states. I want to help train folks from your states. I want to help train your trainers so that we can incorporate this into your stuff. If there's something that we can do to help you, let me know. We handed out the brochures, the Faster Saves Lives. You can go on the website and apply. I'll be here tonight or probably tomorrow for, if you want anything from me, let me know. We are more than happy to help out and help with you, help your legislators, whatever we need to do to work with you. But you've got people willing to die, you owe it to them to help them be effective. And they will be. And then lastly, if there's nothing we can do to help you, if there's something you can do to help us, we can't afford to train Ohio, let alone the whole nation. So we need some corporate support, some sponsors to help us step this up to the next level. Everything we've done so far has simply been reacting to the demand that has come out of that first class. If we're proactive, if we get you working on this, this will just explode. The unfortunate reality is this is necessary in our schools today. People want to say, well, it's not our problem. Yeah, it is. Talk to the school officials who are fighting. Go, look, if you got 2 high school kids fighting, and it's a violent fight, not just 2 friends fighting, but a bad fight. One of them's got the other one down on the ground and kicking them in the back of the head. And these are big kids, and yeah, you're going to need law enforcement, so you're calling for support. But if you stand around and do nothing while one kid kicks the other one in the back of the head for minutes on end until he kills him, and you've never stepped in and done anything as school officials, is that not neglect and negligence? Yeah, absolutely it is. And you know what? If it's wrong to stand and let one kid kill another kid, it is absolutely just as wrong to let one kid kill 12 or 24 or more kids. This is a school problem, and they need to get their heads around this and get going on this. So you need to help them and bring them along. Sometimes it takes years, but we've had multiple schools that 2 years ago said, we are never going to do that, who this summer called up and said, 5 people in our building is not enough. Can we have some more trained? This is changing the way our education works. I look forward to working with all of you guys going forward. Thank you very much, and thanks for the Second Amendment Foundation for putting on an awesome conference. We're all learning. Thank you.
What's the website?
It's FasterSavesLives.org.
Did everybody get that? FasterSavesLives.org. The next panel is the Urban Initiative, and Joe Tartaro is going to lead off, and Rashad Gray is going to play cleanup.
Hang on just a second, please.
Thank you, Julie. I guess this time the mic is working.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Since the Pope has been visiting the United States this past week, I'll begin this panel on urban initiative with a confession. It may not be a surprise to those of you who have perhaps heard me report this fact in the past, but I am a registered Democrat. There may be a few of you here in the audience of the same political persuasion. I will also confess that I haven't voted for a Democrat for president since Hubert Humphrey, who ran against Richard Nixon in 1968. Nixon won, and look where that got us. I will further confess that I'm a city dweller, which is perhaps why I am a D. Because this way I get to vote twice. Not the way you think, but in the primary for local and congressional offices and against people like Andrew Cuomo and his late father, Mario. Take a moment and look around you. I mean, really look at others in this room. The visible face of this or any other pro-gun community meeting seems to be predominantly white and Republican. Yet we have more natural, less visible support for the right to keep and bear arms within the two major minority communities that dominate most of our nation's cities. Recent polling proves that there's a very large pro-gun sentiment among African American population and a smaller but still strong pro-gun sentiment in the Latino community. And it's probably easy to understand if we go back to the realization that gun control was originally white man's law, starting back right after the Civil War. There have been some writers who have even traced it back even further. People of color have not been very visible at our GRPCs or at most NRA annual meetings and shows, and perhaps that should change if we send out the right invitation. In fact, unbelievably, this conference has even fewer people of color than some of the past ones. For many years, several NRA leaders considered the virtues of reaching out to the urban residents, but failed to do much more than get a token person of color elected to the NRA Board of Directors. You and I, and especially the NRA, would have a hard time getting to speak with local pastors or political office holders from the Black and Hispanic communities. But those politicians or local pastors will listen when they are reached by people within their own community. Especially since all of them are sort of grappling with the serious national crime and drug problem, largely centered in our cities, large and small. There's some facts we have to come to grips with. Within the next 20 to 30 years, the US white population will no longer be the majority. The Latino minority is already larger than the Black minority, and both combined, along with the new legal immigrants from the Pacific Rim and the Middle East, will swell the influence of the predominantly anti-gun urban Democrats. A handful of big cities will be able to wag the votes in their states, and a few of those states will be able to dominate the Electoral College. Despite several years of success in state legislatures and the courts, the Second Amendment friendship will face hard times somewhere in the not too distant future. From my own experience, I know pro-gun white people can meet with urban Democrat politicians at the local, state, and federal level for useful conversations when the way has been paved by pro-gun members of the minority communities, or when people of color comprise as much as half of the delegation. and Black witnesses are effective in giving testimony at legislative hearings. I learned that way back in 1976, when the anti-gun Democrat leader of the New York State Assembly and his anti-gun Democrat Codes Committee chairman, both from New York City, by the way, held hearings statewide on a really terrible piece of anti-gun legislation. Most of the witnesses in the hearing around the state were generally opposed to the bill. But one of the shortest and most effective opponents was an elderly Black gentleman from Buffalo who said in opposition to the bill, quote, "I'd rather be caught by the police with an illegal gun than by some cootie when I'm without it." By the way, the measure never passed. And after this lengthy preamble, I'll get to the main point. We, the Second Amendment Foundation, is helping to sponsor what we need, a pro-gun urban initiative in which we are all have a stake and a chance to cooperate. We've needed it for years, but now the foundation, with the help or support of other organizations, is launching an urban initiative. It doesn't have a fancy name, but for the moment it's still the Urban Initiative. And we will have the help of our natural allies in the inner cities, regardless of color. I've worked with some of them already in several cities, and the audience reception is always favorable from women and men, from people of all ages, mainly because they are interested in self-defense. But there's a larger package that is part of our heritage, which we should share. Our strategic goal at this point is to develop, establish, and expand a long-term relationship in urban communities across the nation by linking the Second Amendment friendship, meaning all of us within the pro-gun community, and residents of those communities through a beneficial program that educates and mentors youth and adults for the personal benefit of individual participants and the betterment of their communities. Our objectives are pretty simple. Attract teens and adults by providing a free and entertaining hands-on learning experience in firearm safety, firearms history, marksmanship, outdoor sports, and civics, taught by volunteers with ties to the target community. Build a beneficial long-term alliance with urban communities and their leaders, local government, law enforcement, education, and churches. To recruit graduates from that program to help sustain the program in the future and get their feedback and help in guiding the curriculum. We want to publicize the beneficial participation of the pro-gun family in local cities for better community relations and to assist in fundraising at the local level to support the volunteers who are teaching these courses. Finally, we want to build an awareness of the beneficial influence of the firearms community as a partner, not an enemy, in human affairs, in urban affairs. We'll be holding the first startup meeting on this program, a one-day event in Cleveland, Ohio on October 17th. If you're interested, and I hope you will be, I invite you to participate in the meeting. But I also hope you will tell other gun owners about our plan, and I urge you and your friends to volunteer some time in the local urban outreach classes. If you'd like more information about the Urban Initiative, see me or my co-panelist, Rashad Gray, at the reception tonight or at any convenient time during the rest of the conference. Thank you.
Hello, everyone.
Hi.
I'm Glad everyone's still awake out there. Everybody stretched their legs and everything. Well, great. I'm glad to be here. My name is Rashad Gray. I am the co-director of the Ohio chapter of the National African American Gun Association. And I'm also the CEO of Urban Sports Unlimited, a sports training company and outfitting company from the great state of Ohio. I'm a veteran, I'm a firearms instructor, and most importantly and proudly, I'm a gun rights advocate. And I can't tell you how excited I am to be here amongst all of you. This is my first time here. If you can't tell, I'm a little bit overdressed. And I was so excited to be here, and I was talking to my business partners, and all of a sudden I got this strange phone call that came across my cell phone, and I got all excited because it said it was from the NRA. So I was like, great, wow, I think this is perfect. So I ran out of here real fast, thinking it was something important, that maybe someone asked some questions or an interview or something along those lines. And no, they just want to make sure I'm sending my annual donation, which I promised, of course, as always, and so we'll just go along with that. But with all seriousness, I also represent a demographic that is necessary for the future of the Second Amendment Foundation and its legacy to protect the Second Amendment and all rights for all Americans. This Urban Initiative program is designed to bridge the gap, to connect all Americans in the urban core, in the urban city, to one common cause, which is the Second Amendment. This program's vision is to teach, educate, and empower Americans in all cities all across the United States. The Constitution covers us all, and along that with the Second Amendment. It was so important that our founding fathers put it second, two. The Second Amendment covers all citizens, regardless of race, sex, gender, religion, or political affiliation. And you see this urban cities. I want you to understand this numbers-wise. Around urban cores and urban cities, over 80% of US populations live in urban cities, urban cores. That's urban cities, suburbs, and outer rims. 20% in rural areas. Out of this huge demographic that we deal with, there are many people from many races, different backgrounds, political affiliations, who are gun owners. There's a lot of them, and they never talk about it. In the African American community in the inner city, there is a large constituency that are gun owners for generations, and they never talk about it. And a lot of this has to do because there's an understanding in the community that the laws don't work for them. And policy was designed with a history going back through Jim Crow to take away their rights and their firearm ownership. And there's a sensitivity there, so much so that when we talk to our students, they say, hey, I have a firearm. In my community, in the African American community, my uncle taught me something at a young age. He took me out shooting for the first time when I was 6 years old. I fired a .22 down a city alleyway with a bunch of kids from the neighborhood. Those were the days, you know, you can actually fire a gun in a city and not get arrested, you know, yeah. But that experience, he taught me something that went along with me. He said, Rashad, being a gun owner is not just something that you just do, especially for our community, because he was a historian. He loved history. He told me something that was so profound, it changed my life. He said, Rashad, being a black man and being a gun owner, it's your birthright. can go back and trace my roots, and I'm from generations of gun ownership that goes back 5 and 6 generations, all the way back to slavery. And we brought this, my family brought this up with them throughout the Great Migration and brought that with them here to the north. My uncle was a gunsmith. He used to tinker around and he actually fixed guns for everybody in the neighborhood. And he taught me that same passion for shooting and for the outdoors. In our community, we used to do this and talk about this. But since policies have become so restricted over the past few years, a lot of parents are trying to dissuade their children from shooting and to be involved in these different sports. So this initiative is important to reintroduce the community to that shooting and to gun advocacy. And with this program, what we can do is we can re-engage the conversation. And by empowering our people within the cities who deal with the politicians because they vote for them, we can change policy on the local level, which will then change policy on the national level. I'm asking you, as stakeholders, as my friends, as a member of the Second Amendment Foundation, to take this very seriously. We need all the help we can get from everybody involved to help push this initiative nationally. Not only are we going to educate people, but we're going to empower people to make their own decisions and not have to be left to the winds of change and politicians and people like Bloomberg who have no intention of helping the communities out whatsoever. Any support you can provide, teaching and education, would be greatly, it would be a great thing for the community, and it would be a great thing for this organization. So I humbly ask for your help and support with this. We're going to continue pushing these initiatives. We're going to bring politicians to the table from all walks of life. And even though we might not change every mind, we're going to change dialogue and perception. Thank you.
The next speaker is John Lott. He is the president of the Crime Prevention Research Center. And John is going to talk on facts versus false claims.
I guess I'm not going to talk quite yet.
No, he's not going to talk quite yet. John very kindly flew in from El Paso and fit us into his schedule, and we really, really appreciate it. But he missed the luncheon. But it is my honor to present John with the Scholar of the Year Award. John has won this several times, but
More than that, but you ought to give it to somebody else once in a while.
well,
More often.
you know what? You have to train somebody else to come and take your place,
Right.
or
Well,
no, to assist you. So,
well, I'm not going to be around forever, so
all right.
Anyway, thanks very much. That's nice of you. You know, it's I wasn't going to talk about this, but it's only half joking because yeah, I'm 57. Okay, it may not seem like that sometimes. To me, it does. And there's only so many years I'm going to be able to go and do stuff. And so one of the reasons I'm hoping we can use the Crime Prevention Research Center is to train other people to go and do empirical work. It's hard for people even with moderately conservative views to get through graduate programs. And there's so much of a gap between kind of what is the formal econometrics training that people get and actually being able to use those numbers. And I worry that if we don't replicate the types of skills that we have, then we're going to lose the battle. I mean, there's lots of money on the other side. You know, Bloomberg, you may hear about the $50 million that he spends each year, but he's literally spending a lot more than that
on funding public health programs like they have at Johns Hopkins. I mean, I don't think the work that they do is very good, and I'm going to talk about that more in my talk here. But somehow we have to go and train people to be able to go and do statistical work. And I'll get to this more later, but I appreciate the award. I don't know, this is the 5th or 6th time or whatever it is, I've lost count. But I'm just saying, if only to encourage other people, we should do that. So I did what, before I got to my main talk, I was listening to the talk before me about the Urban Initiative. And I know you guys have heard me, anybody's read my books know my feelings on this, about who benefits the most from owning guns. And it's basically two groups of people. One obvious group that's relevant to the Urban Initiative that was just talked about is it's basically the people most likely to be victims of violent crime. And that overwhelmingly tends to be poor blacks and who live in high crime urban areas. About 75% of the murders in the United States take place in about 3% of the counties. And, you know, what we have to do is, the most vulnerable people in our society, I think, benefit the most from having guns, whether it be people who are most likely to be victims or people who are relatively weak, particularly women and the elderly. You know, if you look at Pew polls, one of the groups that they've shown that's shown the biggest changes in their views on guns, there have been two groups, basically women and blacks. Now you have a majority of blacks for the first time since that they've been doing these types of polls who will say that owning a gun is important to make them safer. But what I think is that so much of the gun control regulations that are being pushed consciously are set up in order to try to disarm those very people who benefit the most. So you look at Maryland. They just now, after 2013, it costs about $300 to go through the process to license and register handguns. For a lot of the people in this room here, that's not going to make the difference between whether or not you're going to be able to go and buy a gun or not. But for poor blacks, let's say, who live in Baltimore, that $300 may make the difference between whether they go and buy a gun. And so here you have the irony that not only are they imposing this large effective tax on people being able to go and get a gun, but we have this image earlier this year in Baltimore where police are told to stand down and not stop the riots in those particular areas that are there. You know, you look at Colorado and Maryland also provide an interesting illustration, and that is in 2013, when Colorado passed its expanded background check, one part of the law imposed a state tax on the transfer of firearms. Lori Sain and a couple other legislators who I was working with at the time put up an amendment on the bill that would have exempted people below the poverty level from having to go and pay that tax. With the exception of two pro-gun Democrats in the state house, every single one of the Democrats there voted against exempting people below the poverty level from having to pay that tax. How many taxes can you name that Democrats would vote unanimously or virtually unanimously against exempting people below the poverty level from having to pay? In Maryland, they had a similar issue when they were there was a brief attempt to try to exempt people below the poverty level from having to pay these over $300 in fees. The problem is that since the Democrats controlled over 2/3 of both the state house and the state senate, they wouldn't even let that amendment come up for a vote. And you look across the country in terms of concealed carry permits, a place like Illinois, it costs over $500 to go through the process to go and get a concealed carry permit. Who are you stopping? There are two impacts that that high fee has. One is it reduces the number of people who go get permits. But the second thing is it changes the mix of people who go and get concealed handgun permits. You're much less likely to go and get poor minorities who are likely to be victims of violent crime to go and get that. And so both of those things reduce the benefit, because if you don't have the people who are likely to be victims being able to kind of raise the risk of criminals going and attacking them, you're not going to have the same deterrent effect as you would if you could prevent where the vast majority of crimes are. So I could go on, but it's just in listening to the talk before me, the gentleman there, it just kind of raised some thoughts in my mind that I wanted to point out, because I think one thing that's important is to emphasize what I honestly believe is the racist nature of a lot of the push for gun control. How it marginalizes and victimizes some of the most vulnerable people in our society. And, so I was going to talk for a minute about part of what I think is kind of going through Michael Bloomberg's mind, or the people who work at Everytown. If you look at polls over the last few decades, what you see is that basically support for gun control, depending upon which poll, either peaked around the late 1990s. And since then, support for gun control has been falling. You look over the last year or two, there's actually been a few polls that show that more people oppose more gun control than support them. The question is why it's been changing. And I think I've been looking at a lot of underlying polls, and I think the main thing that explains the changes over time has been the other polls where people have been asked, do you think a gun makes you safer or not, whether it be in the home or ownership generally? And those polls also began to change around the late 1990s, 2000. Gallup, for example, had a poll in 2000 that asked people whether they thought that gun ownership in the home made people safer or made it riskier. Maybe hard to believe, but in 2000, only 35% of Americans thought that owning a gun in the home made them safer. Okay? Last December, it was up to 63%. That's a massive change, but you can see from year to year, as the percentage of people, if it goes up, that you also see at that time an increase in the percentage of people who oppose more gun control. My guess is Bloomberg's seen those polls, and he understands that what's driving the increased opposition to gun control has been that people think guns on net make them safer, and they don't want to have government regulations that end up disarming them. Here's the problem, though. Since Bloomberg's seen it, he's basically tried a multifaceted approach. He's not just going and trying to go and push political stuff, though I could go and tell you stories from testifying around the country, what he's been doing there. But he's been putting in literally hundreds of millions of dollars into going and funding research. So I've warned about this starting in 2013, but if you look just over the last few months, you've seen a big increase in media coverage of new studies that come out. Every month now, we're seeing several news stories or several new studies that come out. Next year, it's going to be a tidal wave coming up to the 2016 election. And the problem is that when these studies come out, they essentially are given completely uncritical coverage. You know, it's almost like free advertising that they get, and so they know they get this big return from this. So what Bloomberg's done is he's trying to change people's perceptions about whether guns make them safer or riskier. And then he has programs like at Columbia University's Dart School of Journalism, where he trains then journalists how to go and cover the gun issue. And at the same time, then he has his political arm that goes and uses those studies that he's been helping fund. He and Soros and the Obama administration and 23 different large foundations that were involved in the healthcare debate. So we're really talking about huge amounts of money that are being spent on these types of things. And he's putting all these together, but I believe he knows the importance of fundamentally making people think that guns make their lives riskier. Now, it's incredibly poorly done research that's there. And I can go through and give you a few examples. If you just look at studies that have come out in the last 6 weeks or so, you may have heard one study is that the states with the highest gun ownership had the highest rates of police fatalities that are there. How many people have heard about that? You know, it's particularly pernicious type of study because what I think they want to do is, I could also show you polls. Probably the one group of people who support private gun ownership more than any other group, and a lot of this is street officers I know, are police. You know, you go and you ask police questions, you know, Police One, which is the largest private organization of police in the country. They have about 450,000 members. 370,000 of those are active full-time law enforcement. You know, compare it, there's about 650,000 law enforcement in the country, so you get an idea how much they represent of all the police that's there. And, you know, you go and look at survey questions. Do they support people owning guns? Like 95% do. You ask them, do you think that private gun ownership is extremely important in reducing crime? I think it's like 55% believe that. If you ask them, do they think it's very important? About 22% do that. So 77% of police officers think that private ownership of guns is either extremely or very important in reducing crime. You know, it's pretty hard to think of almost any other group in the population that feels that strongly about that. But, you know, these types of studies, they're trying to chip away at that, trying to create some uncertainty on the part of police. So you have this study in the American Journal of Public Health. And, you know, I could go on for an hour, but let me just give you kind of one basic kind of lesson in statistics here. And that is, you know, there's 3 different types of data. And I know I've talked about this in past years for people who've heard me talk about it, or if you've read More Guns, Less Crime or The Bias Against Guns. There's either purely cross-sectional data, time series, or what we call panel data that combines those two. Virtually all academics use the broader set because it's simply not possible to control for all the differences across places in purely cross-sectional. You know, a typical example for cross-sectional, it would be, you know, somebody would say, look, the UK has a relatively low homicide rate, has a low gun ownership rate compared to the United States, so it must be the low gun ownership rate that's causing the low homicide rate. I would respond by saying, look, if you look before they had the gun control laws, they had even lower crime rates, okay? And they went up afterwards. They were still lower than the United States, but the gap between the United States and the UK has gotten smaller since they banned handguns, for example. The study used panel data, which basically means they looked at police deaths by state over a number of years, but they didn't do it the way any regular academic would have done that type of data. What you try to do, one of the benefits of having that data across many different states over many different years, is allows you to control for factors that there's no way you can control for otherwise. So you'd want to say there's something different about different places like the UK versus the United States. And so you want to try to pull out the average crime difference in the UK and in the United States and to see how those crime rates change over time relative to each other in the way I was just explaining when they have some type of change in law. Well, they don't have that basic control in there. The other thing that you have is, let's say crime rates are falling nationally from 2006 to 2007. If I have a change in law, I want to see whether the state that changed its law, not whether it fell, but whether its crime rate fell faster than the states that didn't change their law. Because otherwise what could happen is I may simply be picking up crime rates in the country tend to go up and down together. I don't want to just be picking up the fact that crime rates are falling across the whole country over a period of time. I want to see whether the ones that we're focusing on fell relative to the other ones. People understand the point there? It's a very trivial point, okay? It should be obvious to anybody who does empirical work, but they also didn't control for that. And what you can see, I wrote a piece for Fox that basically said, look, you fix and there are lots of other problems one could talk about, but you fix those problems, which essentially you do the data the way anybody who does this type of stuff would do, and their results reverse. What you find is that the states that had the biggest increases in gun ownership had the biggest relative drops in police deaths, okay? Which is the opposite. And these guys know what's going on. They know how people deal with this type of data. And you wonder how long they played around with it until they could go and get the results that they had there. But what you have to try to do is you know, places like the Crime Prevention Research Center, you know, we try to go and respond to that. There's another study that came out a little while ago claiming that there's no evidence that states with more households with guns led to timid criminals. They were essentially saying there's no deterrence. You make it riskier for criminals, and criminals don't respond. They don't become less likely to go and attack people. Again, the same points that I just pointed out apply equally well to that study. And again, if you did it the way most people would normally do these studies, again, it reverses their results that are there. Another public health study that came out a little while ago was claiming that Connecticut, when it adopted its gun licensing law back in 1995, between 95 and 2005, had a 40% drop in firearm homicides. That's true. Seems like a completely irrelevant fact to me when you want to try to control for other things. So you want to say, well, homicides fell nationwide. Part of the thing is to see whether it fell faster in Connecticut relative to other places. But even more bizarre is here's your paper that just came out a month or so ago. I don't know if you know this, but crime data has been released since 2005, right? Whenever I see something like this, you know, little alarm bells go out because I say, why did they pick one state? They claim they have 10 states with these laws, right? Why did they look at data through 2005? When I do a study, if you've ever read any of my work, I use all the data for all the states that are available for all the years that it's available. You know, I give people an example. Let's say you flipped a coin 20 times, came up with 10 heads and 10 tails. But I let you go and pick any 5 coin tosses. You could pick 5 heads. Will you go around then claiming that that proves that it's an unfair coin, that's biased? I suppose you could claim that, right? But the point is that when researchers pick and choose what data they're going to use, rather than using all the data that's available, they better have a damn good reason why they're doing that type of picking and choosing rather than using it all. And of course, they don't even talk about that in this piece. But I'll just give you one example. I could go on for an hour with this study. If they had simply gone to 2006, the drop in firearm homicides in Connecticut would have been smaller than the overall drop in firearm homicides in the United States as a whole. It would have been significantly smaller. If they had gone to 2007, 2008, and so on, it would have continued to be smaller. And so, you know, at some point, you kind of, when you're an academic, you develop a sixth sense. When people do things in strange ways, it kind of sets off alarm bells saying, why did they do that? If you're going to do something like 2005, then not only should you have a good explanation, but you'd like to have a paragraph or a footnote in the paper someplace and say, oh, by the way, if we'd gone and done additional years of data, it wouldn't have changed our results, okay? But of course, they don't have something like that in that discussion. Now, looking for Julianne here to see how much time I got. I thought I'd talk a tiny bit about the issue of mental illness and guns because obviously it seems to be a big thing right now. And it's kind of put out as a panacea there that if we just have more mental health professionals, if we just make sure that people who have mental illnesses don't get guns, then we can go and make things safe. I'll just give you one interesting statistic from some of the research that we've done at the Crime Prevention Research Center, and that is, if you look at mass public shootings, about 52% of those doing the killing were actually seeing mental health professionals, psychiatrists or psychologists before they engaged in their attacks. So, you know, and the interesting thing is that even though they were seeing them, there's not one single case where this mental health expert was able to identify the individual as a risk to others prior to the attack. And when you go through and look at it, what you find is that there's actually a massive literature in the academic psychiatric literature about their inability to go and identify what turns out to be extremely rare cases of people going and doing these types of things. So it's no reason to blame them when you're dealing with such very rare cases to go and try to identify. But it makes one at least hopefully question, these obvious cures that are being put forward on these things. The other thing that you realize is what a tiny percentage of people with mental illness actually go and commit violent crimes. You look at something like schizophrenia. You're talking about literally thousands of a percentage point of people who have schizophrenia who commit violent crime, let alone people who go and engage in these types of mass public shootings. Would we really want to go and say anybody who has schizophrenia, or even, quote, maybe some level of seriousness with it, not be able to go and own a firearm? Maybe there's an argument for it. But when you're dealing with such a tiny percent that may misuse the gun, you have to realize that there may be others who might actually benefit to some extent from being able to go and use a gun defensively. And we just have to be a little bit careful in terms of who we prevent from owning guns. The basic issue, I would argue, is that if you really believe somebody was a danger to others, maybe we ought to think about just locking up the individuals. Because here's the problem, and that is, if you don't lock them up, but you really believe that they're a danger, if you really just say, I'm going to stop you from being able to legally buy a gun, you look at these types of mass public shootings. A short time for planning these types of attacks is 6 months. Some of these guys are planning these attacks for over 2 years in advance. The notion that you're going to be able to stop somebody from being able to go and buy a gun illegally just isn't very obvious to me. I mean, any more than it is to go and say you're going to be able to stop somebody from going and buying illegal drugs. And so if you really think that they're a danger, maybe the background check might make it a little bit more difficult, but given the amount of time that people are involved in training these things, it's not particularly obvious. And so now we've had kind of the new kind of hot button law on this is California's violence restraining orders that got passed last year. And the irony is again, all the cases that get used for pushing this have nothing to do with the case. They have nothing to do with the law. So you had the Santa Barbara killer last year who killed 6 people and wounded 14 others in his rampage in Santa Barbara. This guy was seeing 3 psychiatrists, one of them a nationally recognized expert on the types of disorders that he had. He had been visited by two deputy sheriffs before the attack who had questioned him. None of those individuals viewed this killer as a danger to other people. So even if the law had been in effect and the sheriff's deputies had had the power to essentially go to a judge and have his guns taken away from him, these individuals didn't view that as something that they should have done in that instance. And of course, the Parker killer, Allison Parker, the journalist, her father, Andy Parker, has been pushing this law as a solution to his daughter's deaths. But in the killer there's no psychiatrist, there's no judge, there's no police, no one who had indicated or raised a flag that this individual had mental illness and therefore even would have been relevant for this. How long do I have? 2 minutes. Okay, so anyway, so let me just try to summarize by saying this, that there's a lot of stuff that's going to be coming out soon, and you're already seeing it's coming out. And we have to fight it on different levels. We have to fight it in terms of the research that's done. We also have to fight it politically. But a lot of these rules, and I hope, and I'm glad that people spoke before me on the urban initiative, I really think we ought to push harder back on who's being stopped by these costs. So we talk about expanded background checks. In Washington, D.C., that adds $200 onto the cost of transferring a gun. In New York State, that adds $80. In Washington State, it adds $60, plus they just put another $25 tax or so on people obtaining a gun. That makes a difference. Those are real taxes. And who are the people who are most likely going to be disarmed as a result of those taxes? Anyway, what I'd like to end you with, I'd like to introduce you to Nikki Gozer. She's just joined the Crime Prevention Research Center over here. Nikki was the 2012 Sybil Luddington Award winner for the NRA, and she's made a huge difference. She's helped fight to get rid of gun-free zones in different places around the country. And we all owe her a debt for what she's gone through with that. So, you know, I kind of hope that together, you know, I kind of provide the intellectual stuff and she provides kind of, you know, makes it real to people about what's been going on. But one thing I'd like to encourage you to do, just so you can kind of keep up to the extent I can try to deal with the research that comes out, is go to our website at crimeresearch.org. And you'll see there's a little note at the top that will tell you how you can subscribe to our email newsletter that we put out. And for anybody, I know some people already subscribe to, you'll see when these studies come out, I try to put together an analysis that hopefully allows you to go and talk to others and use that information in order to try to push back on these things. So it's at crimeresearch.org. And I really appreciate your time, and thank you very much for inviting me to be here again this year.
This brings us to our last panel. What's wrong with Obama's gun control medicine? So what I'm going to do is the panelists have set up what they plan to do. So I am simply going to put the timer here. And do you all want to use the mics here or here?
Here.
Perfect. Okay, I'm just going to put the timer right here, and
Just start talking fast.
doctors, it's your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Julianne and Alan and everybody else who has made this conference possible. And I also want to say thanks to John Lott. My name is Timothy Wheeler, MD. I'm the director of Doctors for Responsible Gun Ownership. I was going to say thanks to John Lott and the Crime Prevention Research Center for taking on the huge task, the challenging task of trying to counter the flood of junk science that we're getting funded by Michael Bloomberg and the foundations that we've dealt with for many years now. At Doctors for Responsible Gun Ownership, we also want to do that. And we also want to give you some practical advice on how to deal with some of the problems that have come up because of the public health community's sustained assault on the right to keep and bear arms. I'm going to introduce each of these speakers up here individually in a minute, but just very quickly, from my left, we have Robert Young, MD. On the right here, we have Arthur Pushpenda, MD. And on the very end, somebody you've heard before, John Edine, MD. This is my leadership team, our leadership team of Doctors for Responsible Gun Ownership. I'm going to let them do the talking today. But before I sit down and let them start, I want to tell you about one resource that's available to you now on our website, drgo.us, which Arthur, by the way, has turned into a wonderful instrument for getting our word out. I encourage you to go there. We have fresh blog content twice weekly, and we have a resource there that I want to tell you about that's pretty timely now. It actually has gotten about, last time I looked, about 60,000 hits, and it's a resource called What to Do When Your Doctor Asks About Your Guns. It's right there on the opening page, drgo.us. All right. Since the beginning of the Republic, people have emigrated to these shores from Poland, and they have become some of our best American citizens and some of our most fervent supporters of our natural rights. And one of those is Arthur Pushpenda, MD, to my immediate right. Arthur is a diagnostic imaging specialist in Southern California. Actually, he's in the Los Angeles area, right down the freeway from me. He is the social media editor for Doctors for Responsible Gun Ownership. He focuses on the behind-the-scenes operation of DRGO in order to build the organization's brand equity and our message penetration. As I said, Arthur's originally from Poland, from the former Soviet bloc. He was introduced to shooting by his uncle, who is also an IPSC competitor and a former Polish Army marksman. And Arthur is a student of the gun who cherishes the Second Amendment in its complete and unabridged interpretation. Ladies and gentlemen, Arthur Prishpinda, MD.
Hi, everyone. My name is Arthur, and I'm a California gun owner. So, my official, can everybody hear me okay? My official title is social media editor. Close to the mic? Okay, thank you. In that facility, my job was to revamp and operate the organization's website and its Facebook and its Twitter feed. And the aim of that is to engage the public in an effort to affect public opinion and get our message out to the public. Ultimately, I want to put DRGO and our ideas in the consciousness of, first, the general public and ultimately policymakers. To do that, we're going to need to leverage the media. And so what I ultimately think of myself as is the brand manager, not so much just a website operator. And what I want to be guided by is Margaret Thatcher's principle that first you win the argument,
way for you. I'm from Missouri. Who's from Missouri? Okay. I grew up in the Ozarks. Bought my first rifle at the age of 16 at the hardware store. Boy, do I miss those days. And then I moved to New York State. Thank you. Yes, I'm sorry in a number of ways, although I'll get to one way a little bit later that it's probably a good thing. But it was for professional reasons, and it's a good place to practice psychiatry, and you can take that any way you want. So you've heard that most all mass murderers apparently have some kind of mental illness. Now they aren't all in treatment, as John Lott just said. Maybe 52% of them have been. I haven't pinned it down that far. But if you count them up, probably all but one over the last 10 or 20 years had some sort of problem of that sort. And I'm talking about something that isn't a significant issue in the whole frame of, quote, gun violence either. And you all know that, right? You know, mass murder victims are a fraction of a percent overall. That's not where the problem is. But people want to talk about that, so I'm going to talk about it. I see a lot of guns in here. You all feel safe? Me too. About 50% of Americans in their lifetimes will have a diagnosable mental illness of some kind. Now that involves around 200 different possible diagnoses. And that's not just psychiatrists trying to work up business. We're overwhelmed as it is. About 25% of us at any given time have a diagnosable mental illness. Unfortunately, most of us actually aren't getting treated at the time. Now look around. Do you still feel safe? Well, you should. You should, because people with mental illnesses commit violence, and I don't mean just murder, I mean violence of any kind, at a much lower rate than that of the population in general. So even though psychiatrists are perhaps the most vulnerable specialists to violence by patients, it doesn't really worry me day in, day out, and it hasn't for the last 30 years, and it shouldn't the American population in general. And let's see, where are we going here? What am I doing up here? I'd call it 10% of violent crime. About 5% of people with about 5% of violent crime is committed by people with some form of mental illness. About another 5% of people with a combination of mental illness and substance abuse. I'm going to skip over substance abuse. If you have questions about that, I'll talk about it at the question and answer, because it's a bit more complicated a topic. If we're going to talk about diagnoses, the chief risks are probably three. Paranoid states, particularly schizophrenia, paranoid schizophrenia, in which someone is sick enough that they start worrying so much that they are vulnerable to harm that they may at some point choose a good offense as their best defense. Major depression, of course, in which suicide is always a risk. And suicide is probably the biggest issue certainly in mental illness and death, and certainly in mental illness and misuse of guns, of course. And then I would add to that severe combat PTSD. And those can present, of course, with risks of both homicide and suicide. As you heard from Dr. Lott, I can't predict violence very well. No one can. Psychiatrists like me are probably better than average. But if I'm talking to somebody with their entire history and I'm asked to say whether they're likely to be violent over the next 24 hours, I have about a 50-50 chance of being right. Okay, you all know what that means. Good. And that's better than most people can hit, even though it sounds like it's purely random. Okay, I'm going to touch on a number of things and then try to tie them together. One of the big issues in background checks and in discussion about how to prevent violence by people with mental illness has to do with the criteria that we use currently. It boils down to adjudication of a mental illness. Now, that can happen in several ways. It can actually happen by a judge. Typically, that would be in a proceeding to assess guardianship. Let's say somebody's demented. It happens all the time when we commit someone for treatment, especially to an inpatient unit. That has to happen if you're sick enough and dangerous enough. The problem, of course, is that follows you the rest of your life. I can adjudicate someone as mentally defective just by putting them in the hospital to treat them, to make them well, so that they do not represent a danger or perhaps even have that mental illness again. That's a terrible thing about our entire system, of course. And I'll point out that when people are talking about competence, and we're talking about the VA and the Social Security Administration problems, there are many kinds of competence. I may be asked to decide if someone can cooperate in their defense in a criminal proceeding. I may be asked if someone's capable of handling their money. Of course, there's a defense against criminal convictions by reason of insanity. And there are other more neurologically based incompetences that can have to do with pure functions like the capacity to express or to receive communication. So, as you've heard, just because there's one sort of incompetence, even the inability to manage money, that has nothing to do with anything else, including the potential to manage a firearm safely. Next time I'm putting this all on one page. All right. Okay, so what can we do about all this? You've heard about the population-wide lack of value of background checks. The same really would apply to NICS checks, we all know that. But they exist, and if we're going to use these things, at least they need to be complete. At least all states need to submit the same information the same ways. The problem then comes in how these things are applied. And just like when you get on a no-fly list, does anybody know how to get off the NICS prohibition? Not allowed. Sir? No, right. I have no clue. So once I commit you to a hospital, I have no clue how to get you off that. Except if you're in a state where say a permitting authority is interested in looking at your history, is willing to hear from someone who's treated you for years, like me in some cases. But that just can't apply to most people. So we really have to depend on all of us. We need to depend on family and friends. Because when someone starts to go bad, whether it's for a mental illness or otherwise, the people who are most likely to see it are the people who are closest to them. It isn't me. Once they get to see me, it's because someone else has gotten them to see me. And that isn't going to happen for most people. So from that need comes the idea, say, of gun violence restraining orders. I'm going to use that term even though the prominent example in California is a pretty bad one for lack of real due process. And that's where I'm going to come to in just a minute. Sir? Uh-oh. Who's going to kick me off, you or Julie? All right. what they lack is due process. There's a model in New York that works fine. When I have to keep someone in the hospital longer than the initial commitment, when I have to force someone to take medicine, I have to go to a judge. The subject has to be there if they want to be there. They get free counsel then. And if I want to do it again, the same thing has to happen. And if they want to appeal, the same thing happens. That's due process. That's what should happen in all of these ways. If a family member thinks there's a problem, that's the way it should happen. That cuts down false accusations, and all of these things can shorten prohibition to the minimum necessary, which could be for a weekend, could be for 6 months, should be for whatever it takes, and it always should include, in the case of someone mentally ill, the commitment to treatment at that time. That's what gets them better. People who are treated are far less violent than people who are not. You've read about the association of psychiatric medicines with violence? Well, that's because we have to use them to treat people who may be violent. It's the illness, it's not the medicine. So, do you all know Martin Niemöller? Anybody? Anybody ever hear of him? German pastor who became gradually an opponent of the Nazis and earned 8 years in a concentration camp for the privilege. You probably have heard something like this. When they came for the socialists, I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. When they came for the trade unionists, I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. When they came for the Jews, I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak out. So I want to say right now to the 75% of you here, thank you very much for guarding the civil rights of the other 25% of us here. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Our last speaker, you recognize from previous gun rights policy conferences. He's a pediatric orthopedic surgeon who's in private practice in San Antonio for the past 18 years. He's the membership director of Doctors for Responsible Gun Ownership. He's a member, as I said, of our leadership team. He's written for our blog. He has also appeared as a guest on Armed America Radio with Mark Walters, who you heard earlier, Gun Talk, Handgun World podcast. He's also been a guest and a guest co-host on the Polite Society podcast. Dr. Adine is an NRA certified basic pistol instructor and a graduate of Masad Ayub Group's MAG 40 class. He continues to pursue firearms training and continues to organize courses for new shooters in the medical community. His passion is working toward the removal of gun-free zones, especially in hospitals. Ladies and gentlemen, John Adine, MD.
Thanks a lot. At least I don't have to follow Masad Ayub this year, so that's good. Last year I spoke at this meeting about my efforts to remove gun-free zones from hospitals. I'm still working towards that goal. The Texas legislature was able to pass licensed open carry and campus carry. They also passed knife preemption. Unfortunately, bills specifically addressing hospital carry, House Bill 308 and HB 395 by Representative Drew Springer, and Senate Bill 311 by Senator and Dr. Donna Campbell failed to make it through the legislative process. And the next session isn't until 2017. In 2014 and 2015, we saw an attack against a psychiatrist in Darby, Pennsylvania, and an attack against a heart surgeon in Boston, Massachusetts. Both of these places were designated as gun-free zones. Most hospitals in America are gun-free zones and thus are soft targets, and this is a problem. I'm going to talk about the terrorist threat against hospitals. With the recent increase in terrorist activity by ISIS and around the globe and the influx of Syrian refugees and ISIS cells in North America, we have to ask ourselves, what are their targets and how will they attack? John Giduk, in his book, when terror returns describes the optimal target site for a high magnitude hostage seize, it will be a structure that can be quickly secured and defended by a small team. It would allow large vehicles to approach with the terror team and weapons. It would also have little security and contain a sufficiently sized central location to hold hostages. It would also be have a victim population of desired composition whose scheduled presence was either predictable or easily ascertainable via rudimentary intelligence gathering. And in larger metropolitan areas, diversionary attacks would be used to delay the police. Most likely targets are schools and hospitals, but also things like Super Kmarts, Walmarts, that kind of stuff. The history. In 2013, Dr. Boaz Ganor and Dr. Miri Halperin-Wernley of the International Institute of Counterterrorism wrote a white paper titled Terrorist Attacks Against Hospitals, Case Studies. They looked at approximately 100 terrorist attacks against hospitals worldwide in 43 countries on every continent, killing approximately 775 people and wounding 1,217 others between 1981 and 2013. They pointed out that the large number of patients, visitors, and medical staff ensure that an attack on hospitals will produce multiple casualties. It would also expect that attack on a facility dedicated to health and healing would receive extensive media coverage. An attack on a hospital is demoralizing to a community and increases anxiety due to the familiarity of the setting of fear that such an attack would involve either yourself or someone that you love. These also, hospitals hold materials and knowledge that can be used to further harm. These include medications, poisons, radioactive materials, and biological cultures. Also, confidential health information could be hacked and used for nefarious purposes. Hospitals can either be a primary or secondary target of attack. As a secondary target, it can be used to distract security and response assets from the primary attack. And as a primary target, we can see suicide attacks, bombings, kidnappings and negotiations, shootings, and even mortar and rocket attacks. The most costly example of an attack on a hospital happened in Budanovsk, Russia in June of 1995. 150 Chechen terrorists led by Samil Basayev took 2,000 hostages. 2,000 hostages. Okay, 129 civilians, 18 police, and 18 soldiers were killed. More than 400 people were wounded. Later, 18 people died of their wounds. The attack happened about 6 months after Russia invaded Chechnya. And I'm not going to go into the details. You can look it up. But basically, the demands were they wanted to stop the war in Chechnya. They wanted to pull out federal troops. And they wanted to start direct negotiations with the Chechen rebels to get the Russians out of Chechnya. There was a counterattack that happened, actually several counterattacks that happened, all of which failed. A lot of the hostages were killed with grenade fragments and in the crossfire. Finally, after about 5 days, the Prime Minister, Chernomyrdin, agreed to the hostages' demands, and they were actually allowed to leave Russia and go back to Chechnya, taking hostages with them. They took a circuitous route, and when they got to one of these small border towns, they released the hostages and disappeared into the woods and were able to go back to Chechnya, okay? Not only that, but they were able to take an X-ray machine with them that had cesium-137, and as a result, they had the first dirty bomb attack. Okay, so think about this stuff. Okay, as a result, the Russian government and people were shaken. The Russian leadership was humbled and was seen as being inept. Boris Yeltsin was condemned. He was in charge at that time. The security and interior ministers resigned, and a law was passed banning accepting terrorist demands during hostage situations. So where do we go from here? We know that most suicide attacks at hospitals have been suicide bombings, with the second most common scenario being the armed assault. Hospitals are soft targets with multiple entrances. Visitors are seldom identified, and their baggage is seldom screened or searched. Many hospitals do not have a significant armed security presence, and a large size and long straight hallways give the advantage to the hostage takers. There have also been an upsurge in female suicide bombers. Hospitals have a large number of female employees who may be exploited by radical Islamists. Physicians are not immune. There have been several instances of attacks by radicalized doctors. Dr. Ayman al-Zawahiri was Osama bin Laden's number 2 in Al-Qaeda until Osama bin Laden was killed, and then he took over. Also, we all know about Dr. Nadal Hassan, the Army psychiatrist who killed 13 and wounded 32 in an attack at Fort Hood in Texas, my home state. There are many more examples. Hospitals contain the radioactive and biological materials. Often the security on those materials is inadequate. Hospitals have a legal responsibility to provide a safe and secure environment for staff, patients, and their families. Do hospitals have a liability risk in the age of terrorism? Is an attack a foreseeable event? Does your hospital have a plan? In the event of a local terrorist attack, does your hospital have a plan to secure the emergency department from suicide bombers? Is there a plan for ambulances and vehicles to be searched before they are allowed to approach the hospital itself? Would a plan to have a trained and armed hospital staff already in place be an advantage and possibly deter or disrupt the plans of hostage takers and allow staff and patients to escape? Imagine the devastation in your community if there was a Boston Marathon type bombing followed by a suicide bomb attack on the emergency department just as casualties begin to arrive. It could never happen, not here, not in my hospital, until it does. Thank you.
Turn that off. I'd like to thank all the doctors, and I'm so excited that the Doctors for Responsible Gun Ownership are as active and back, and staff has been really happy to have you part of us, and we look forward to growing and growing and growing. Did anybody leave an iPad in a black cover?
I'll take it.
No, nobody recognizes this, huh? Okay. Right now it's 5:46, and instead of bringing people back for the questions and answers, I'm going to suggest that you go out and you can look for books. John Lott is there, Chris Bird, Tim's book, very, very good book that he did with another emergency physician, excellent book. Alan Corwin can sign books, David Hardy, Dave Workman, Alan Gottlieb, and then you can go and ask the questions of the people who are out there in the hallways right now, and you can get a better one-on-one chance since we don't have that much time. And at 6:30, there will be a reception in the same place as it was last night. You go out to the lobby and just continue straight down and all the way to the left. Thank you very much, and we will be back in tomorrow morning at 8:30. We'll start the registration, and I want to tell you that tomorrow C-SPAN will be here. So I just want to let you know C-SPAN will be here. We will have to move some of the tables and stuff for them to put their cameras in, but I don't know where exactly. Thank you so very much, and we'll see you this evening. Thank you. Oh, thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, live viewers, don't go anywhere. We are
One more thing, resolutions, Jenny Jennings, right here. Don't forget your resolutions. Thank you.
We're going to continue broadcasting here from Gun Rights Policy Conference 2015. I'm going to go ahead and pan down the audio from the main. I'm going to pan down the audio from the main room here. We're going to keep our audio up. We're going to continue broadcasting here for a little while. And as you, excuse me, I'm sorry. You just heard from Dr. Robert Young, and he was up on the stage talking about mental illness, and he has graciously decided to come and sit down with us and have a little bit of conversation after the conference. thank you, Dr. Young, for joining us. Great talk up there.
Very happy to, Paul. Thanks for the invitation.
Doctor, you said some things that really grabbed my attention. One was that mental patients are less violent than the population at large. Would you elaborate on that a little bit? No, I think perhaps you said mental patients who are being treated.
Well, actually, the statistics are that everyone who has a mental illness overall, on average, commits less violence, population in general, period. Not just those who are treated, because a tiny, tiny fraction of folks with mental illness are ever violent at all. So yeah, it applies to everyone with any mental illness diagnosis.
That's a startling statistic.
And it goes against the meme being promoted in the media that the crazy people are a danger to the population.
Mm-hmm. On occasion, I don't like to use the word crazy because when I say it's official, but on occasion, people who are mentally ill are more dangerous because of that. But the difference, and the thing that can put these two ideas together is the fact that so very, very few folks with any mental illness are ever affected in that way by their mental illness. When they do something, we hear about it. So, for example, the fact that all mass murderers probably are mentally ill in some way is true. And that's something that really takes our attention. Media are all over it. And a big part of the story is always whatever their mental illness may seem to be. But mass murdering kills a fraction of a percent of everyone who dies of homicide. And it is not epidemiologically, it's not on a population basis, a big issue in terms of trying to keep people safe from violence at all.
Right. And as someone, as A.W.R. Hawkins pointed out, we have to include, and John Lott as well, to say, therefore we should disarm anyone remotely attached to a mental illness would probably be counterproductive because it would immediately deny them the benefits that firearms provide, even in that population itself, let alone to the population at large.
There's certainly a risk that if we started a public policy where anyone who has a diagnosis of a mental illness is going to lose their guns forever, then I'm afraid my business would decrease, and that would be very sad, because our job is to treat people, make them well, not to give them a reason to further avoid treatment. If you were going to do that, as I just talked about, over our lifetimes, we would have to disarm half the population, because half of us over our lifetimes are going to have some form of mental illness. It's extraordinarily common, and those of us on the pro-gun rights side are not going to go along with that, because that would get the anti-gunners halfway to their goal.
Now, just describe the typical mental illness that you treat. We think of the violent examples, the schizophrenics, the paranoids. That's not your bread and butter, is it?
Oh, no. I mean, I treat plenty of schizophrenics. I treat paranoid schizophrenics. They're all fine. That's why we treat them. That's what happens after we treat them. This is an anecdote, but it's as the longer I practice, the more valid an anecdote it is. I've been in practice for 30 years now. I treated thousands of patients with all manner of mental illnesses. To my knowledge, not one of those people has ever gone on a rampage. I have a very, very, very difficult time thinking of any of them who's killed anyone, to my knowledge. A very few have suicided. That is the norm. That is typical in the treatment of mental illness. And half of everyone you see walking around throughout your life are examples of that.
Now, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't know a lot of paranoid schizophrenics, or at least not that I recognize.
You don't know that right. You don't
Okay.
know that you do.
That they're prevalent enough that I'm missing them, is what you're telling me, rather than this person was depressed, this person was anxious.
Right, right. You've probably known someone who said they were depressed, and you probably have some friends who obviously have anxiety or say so. You probably don't know anyone who has told you they have schizophrenia, but roughly 2% of everyone you know does.
Wow, 1 in 50. So there are dozens in this room, just statistically, in a gathering this size.
And he's nodding.
That's the miracle of modern medicine.
It works. There are neighbors. Is really the miracle.
Exactly.
Would you made a statement right as you had to close your talk? I'd like you to expand on it.
Yes.
And exactly along the same line that you just mentioned, the reason that we see violent people on drugs isn't that the drugs made them violent, but
Right.
that the drugs allowed them to reintegrate into society.
Right.
Would you elaborate on that a little bit?
Well, because representing psychiatry, I'm not perfect.
Well,
People who, for whom their illnesses could promote violence, it happens. It's going to happen much less often, but it will still happen very rarely once they've started treatment. Let me see if I can summarize, though, the findings of a couple of studies that make this point very well, if I can help you understand them. Both antidepressants and antipsychotics have been studied in this way. Now, most people start getting treated for a major mental illness by the time they're in their 20s. Of course, our life expectancies, even with mental illness, are 60 to 70 years. Half of the violence committed by those people happens before they're treated, on average, by the time they're in their 20s.
Yes.
The other half happens after they're treated over the next 40 or 50 years. Now,
yeah.
What does that mean about the relative value of treatment?
That it decreases the probability of violence by
Year
some
by
factor.
year after year after year.
Do we have time? Okay. Where can people learn more about Doctors for Responsible Gun Ownership? You are the first psychiatrist or psychologist that I've met in DRGO. How well is your profession represented in DRGO, and how would people find out more about your organization?
Well, you've met the leadership team here.
Right.
I'm sure you mentioned all of us to your listeners. We have these four people being very active in the ways we've talked about. Dr. Wheeler and I do most of the writing. You'll see something from one of us every week, probably both of us. For example, I've done a lot of writing about the junk science that comes out from the public health mills that Dr. Lott a little bit earlier alluded to and criticized. We are in the process of developing our network. We're inviting any doctors, anybody in the healthcare field to join us to do what we're doing, and anyone else who's interested to learn what we're doing at drgo.us.
Thank you very much, Dr. Young.
Okay, thank you, Rob. Yeah.
We got more interviews coming up. Stepping up here, getting set down, and getting a headset on is AWR Hawkins.
This is one of the slummier news sets that you've been on, at least when I've seen you. Usually it's NRA News. It's much better gigs, but thank you for coming down anyway.
Thank you.
It was fascinating to hear your description of the media.
He's next.
Explain to our listeners your background, because you're not a journalist. I mean, you don't have a journalism degree.
No, I don't. I have a PhD in
John
military
Lott.
history, and I have a master's in Southern history.
Well, what that means is you know what you're talking about.
If we're talking about history, I do. Yeah.
Well, at least you know what a fact looks like.
Yes. Yeah.
And how to research what might have actually happened.
Right. And which is what you do, against gun controllers. That's what you do, because they make a claim. I test the claim, just as I would if somebody said this was the cause of World War II. I test via research what was the cause of World War II or World War I, or whatever we're dealing with. But Yeah, so it's all similar in that way.
It is. And thank you. This is your first conference. What do you think of it?
I really like it. It's far different. You know, I've been to a lot of different conferences. I like this conference because I feel like information is actually exchanged. And by that, I mean, I feel like the people, and they may have tricked me, but I feel like the people actually came here almost to arm themselves to go out and combat gun controllers themselves. Not combat them in a, you know, in an illegal way, but to combat them by clashing idea against idea.
I don't think they tricked you. I think I have exactly the same feeling here.
Oh, that's your experience as well?
Absolutely.
Yeah, if they've tricked you, it's a very widespread illusion that we all seem to share.
No, but it's refreshing. I was telling Alan, you know, it's refreshing to come to a place like this where that's happening. So
Yes, you see what's happening in other states, and you feel energized to go and affect change
Right.
in your own area.
Right.
And you gain new practical ideas for how to make that happen.
Right.
We see you on Breitbart. We see you in a few news outlets, primarily NRA. Where else have you been where I should have seen you?
Well, I mean, I'm mainly at Breitbart.
Yeah.
That's who I'm a columnist for them. But I've been on Fox News some. I've been on CNN a little. I've been on HLN a little bit. But
Okay.
mainly I'm writing all day. And so people who want to find me Breitbart or Twitter or Facebook.
What you weren't in this field 10 years ago, or if you were, I missed it.
No,
What pulled you in?
It's a long story. I'm trying to think of a condensed answer.
Oh, okay.
But I was teaching. I mean, when I finished my PhD, I was teaching, and you have trouble, even if your degree is in military history, if you're a supporter of the military or you're conservative, it's hard to get a job. And so I was at Texas Tech, but Texas Tech wasn't the school that refused to hire me. It's an overall experience.
Oh, yes.
And I became just sick and tired of it. And I'll be honest with you, I think the first thing I wrote was for American Thinker.
Yes.
Years ago. And then just progressed from there, but it's just, I don't know. I don't have a real good answer for you, except I was almost desperate to find something that would save me from teaching because in teaching they were going to keep me on the bottom rung because of my convictions.
Right.
They were going to punish me because of my convictions. And looking back, I'm right where I need to be. I'm doing what I was born to do. But coming into it, I had no idea. I was getting a PhD so I could teach. And once that began, I'm like, oh, this is the last thing I need to do. And right now I'm where I need to be at Breitbart News, a wonderful company. They love gun rights. And so it's a great mesh for me.
Now, you and I often respond to news in the sense that we do secondary investigation, in the sense that there'll be an external event. We'll look at the media response, then we'll critique it by doing some of our own independent research. Could you talk about that for a little bit?
Well, I critique it basically by, again, it sounds like I'm saying the same thing. I'm not trying to, but I critique it the same way I would critique Mein Kampf or any other historical document. I go through it. I look for places where it's inconsistent, incongruent. And once I find the incongruency, I seize on it. I try to figure out, why is it incongruent? Is that intentional? Is there a legislative benefit from that incongruency? Are they pushing that? As I said today, you know, when you look at the number of deaths between 1989 and today with guns versus the number of deaths in all American wars, when someone compares those two numbers and they're not honest, then I have to ask, why are they not honest? Who does that benefit? And you start to see these gun control groups are either ignorant, and I say that in a classic sense, they're either ignorant, they don't know better, or they're intentionally, willfully lying to push a gun control agenda. And I honestly try not to make that decision. I think the correct writer gets that in front of the people, and the people make that decision with the facts. That's what I try to do.
You report, we'll decide.
That's it.
But that requires a depth of knowledge of history of our current society that goes a little bit deeper than a Twitter feed.
Right.
Is that your training? Is that your passion? both.
Well, I think that though, but I think I'm going to give the people some credit here, and I'm not saying you're not doing that, but I'm going to give them a little credit. I've seen since Joe Manchin's push for gun control, and it's important to understand Senator Joe Manchin is a gun controller, first class.
Right.
Since his push for gun control, there's been a shift in the American mindset. And I don't know what happened, but if you notice, between Sandy Hook, which is December 2012, and the failure of Joe Manchin's gun control in April 2013, American people went, ho, ho, ho. If we pass more gun control, I can't defend my life. And they began to educate themselves. And I really believe that in the last 3 years, I've seen the American people educating themselves in the importance of the Second Amendment, the importance of self-defense, the importance of having a gun at home. Polls bear this out. Polls bear out that people have turned against gun control, not for it. And so I don't really think it's a hard sell. If we get the facts in front of them, American people understand it.
So you talked about being right where you need to be, right where you were born to be. Well, you're to elaborate on the point you made about our place in history, you're at the right time as well.
Yeah, I think for gun rights, I don't know if there's ever been a time like this, because they're under assault from all directions. You think about it this way: the Pope can't give a speech without Gabby Gifford saying, "Hey, send me $3 for gun control."
Right.
So you're exactly right. We've won on the federal level, stateside. We've won. But now there's an international push with the UN Treaty, ATT. There's an international push that will be using the Pope's words. And so there's a constant fight. We have to constantly fight that. So it's a good time for that.
On the other hand, we've seen gun culture 2.0, the urbanization of gun ownership. It's not about the field sports and target shooting. It's now centered around self-defense in a way that it never was before. To again talk about the classics, the best of times, the worst of times.
Right, but that's what we needed. We needed somehow to get away from this fallacy that that gun rights exist, so that I can target shoot, duck hunt. You know what I'm saying? Self-defense. It's about defending my life, my family's life.
And in a way, there has to be some kind of attack on those rights that gets people energized and motivated to take action and to treasure those rights and cherish them.
You're right. I think Obama has brought us that dangerous situation. I don't want to blame him for everything. There's plenty of things I do want to blame him for. I don't agree with him on anything. Don't get me wrong.
But we don't need to blame this one on.
But I believe under him, we have seen so much chaos in our society that people feel unsafe. Yes. And the gun in the woman's purse, the gun on the man's hip, the gun in the bedroom makes them feel safer, because they can do what their government can't do. They can defend their family and property.
Right, and the chaotic situation has made them think about that, and made them realize vulnerability.
Exactly right. And you know what? What else contributed was the Democrat push after Sandy Hook. You had the chaos coupled with the Democrat push. In the midst of the chaos, we're going to disarm you. That didn't go over well. People do not want to be disarmed.
So I guess we can, in a way, thank them for doing us a favor.
In a roundabout way, which they did not intend to do.
A very roundabout way.
You're right.
So where can we learn more about and read your writings and learn more?
Anybody who wants to read what I write can go to Breitbart News, or they can just Google AWR, or they can look at AWR on Twitter, AWR on Facebook. It's hard to find somebody else that has that name, and they'll be able to find me. Or any of my articles, my name's in blue at the top. If you click it, a list of them will come up. But solely write for Breitbart News. And as I said earlier, that's a good thing, because they are pro Second Amendment to the core, and that gives me a platform to keep fighting for these things.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, I got to ask one final question. Do you think this will be your last gun rights policy conference?
Oh, no. No, as I said, I didn't say that just to say it. I was telling Alan, this is an incredible conference. And I love to come places where ideas are being exchanged, information exchanged. So, no, I'll see you in Tampa next year.
Sounds great.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, we got more guests coming up. Yeah, we got interviews to go. We got more interviews to go. We're going to be swapping out. AWR Hawkins is just finishing up here. He'll be getting out of the chair here in just a second as he converses with John and Rachel. But coming in, we have got
Go Red Raiders.
I honestly, I would say
My cousin's wife is a Texas.
one of the.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Hawkins.
Oh, I didn't know. Jeez.
We've got coming up now. Honestly, this is one of the interviews. When I started podcasting 4 years ago, I wanted to get to talk to Alan Gottlieb. A couple of years ago, I got to talk to him when I came to GRPC, and every once in a while, I get to talk to him when I go down to SHOT Show because he's there every year promoting the Second Amendment Foundation. But this is the first time I think we've actually had you on our microphones on the air. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you for being here at the Gun Rights Policy Conference, and I'm excited to be on your podcast finally.
Yeah.
Well, we can fix that.
This is the absolute. There are three big shows when it comes to guns and gun rights. There's the year starts off with SHOT Show in January. In the spring, it goes to the NRA show. But in my opinion, when you folks, the Second Amendment Foundation and the Citizens Committee for the Right to Keep and Bear Arms, put on the Gun Rights Policy Conference, this is the one I will not miss, because I get to interact with people like you, with people like Dr. John Lott, with all the people that are really making things happen in gun rights and keeping our right to keep and bear arms. They're all here, and we get to talk.
Yeah, this is a little different. You know, I go to the NRA convention and the SHOT Show as well. But there's something unique about the Gun Rights Policy Conference, maybe because it's all information and it's all gun rights. I mean, it isn't so much to look at the new firearms that are out this year or new products. It's not about making profits for the gun industry necessarily.
Right.
This is all quote unquote grassroots, and it's while we put the conference on, it's really not necessarily our conference, because if you look at the agenda, when you have 60 to 70 speakers and you've got scores of grassroots groups from all across the country being part of it, it's sort of, we help set the agenda and we pay for it, we organize it, but it's really what I call the People's Conference. It's the gun rights movement conference.
It takes on a life of its own.
It does every year, and you can never tell which way that life is going to go. And each one has a certain amount of electricity to it that's just a little bit different. You know, in the year when you win the McDonald versus Chicago is a lawsuit, and you have Otis McDonald and the McDonald story of growing up his life and being poor and being black in the inner city where you can't get police protection. They won't let you have a handgun in your home to protect yourself. And he goes through all the times, the drug gangs on the street have ripped his house off, and it becomes human. You know, that had electricity to it. And then other years, different things, and you never know what's going to happen. And sometimes what really makes the conference is something that happens the week before that you couldn't even plan if you wanted to.
It's growing. Each year it gets bigger. The talent gets better, and the talent changes. It's not the same old year after year.
Well, it's funny you say that, because sometimes
it's true. We've had people here. I mean, we were just talking about people who've been coming for 20 years, and this is the 30th. But no,
But you noticed something this year, and what you're noticing is of the 70 speakers roughly that we have, about 20 of the 70 have never ever spoke at a gun rights policy conference in the past. And that's a little unusual, because once you had 30 of them or 29 under your belt before your 30th, it's hard not to have repeat offenders.
That's right.
So that's made a big difference, and like sometimes we don't always grow every year. Sometimes it shrinks a little bit. Sometimes it grows a little bit. Like last year, we would have had an all-time record attendance that would have exceeded this year if it weren't for the fact that Chicago's air traffic control system was shut down. All the plane flights were canceled because of the crazy guy that burnt the air traffic control system down. That would have been the biggest one in our history, and we were looking excited to it. That one was I guess for us, the attendees didn't realize it. We still had a great attendance, but we had to change the agenda hourly, because you never knew if a speaker could get in on an airplane.
That's right.
And for us, it was like, oh my God. And we had to pull people on that one, from a lot of people from the audience, to be up on panels to speak that weren't supposed to be speakers, to make it flow. That was a miracle. I mean, that was a work in progress as we were doing it. And we learned a lot from that crisis control.
That was jazz, made up on the fly.
Made up on the fly.
And that says something about the type of people who attend. They're the type of people who get stuff done. There's so much energy just among the attendees.
Yeah, the attendees are really doers and also innovators.
Yes.
And they're experienced, they're knowledgeable, and the gun rights movement has grown up a lot. When we first started doing these, there were a lot of people that just got involved. They didn't have a lot of experience under their belt. Not only has the gun rights movement grown, but it's gotten sophisticated.
It's matured.
Yes.
Do you think that the percentage of new speakers this year speaks to new blood in the gun rights movement?
Some of them are new blood, and some of them are people that have been around a while but have finally hit their stride.
Okay.
And they've made something happen. They've accomplished something. You know, we don't try to put speakers up who don't have a good message, to,
Right.
you know, don't direct us for the future. And a lot of what we do at GRPC is to try to project things for the future. I mean, it's like, you know, we're not to be reactive, so to speak, about what, you know, what's happening, but to try and seize the initiative, seize the agenda, and make the other side dance to our tune.
We do have another interview coming up in a few minutes, but before we go, I really want to have you talk about the Second Amendment Foundation. You folks have, my opinion only, I'm speaking for Paul Lathrop of the Polite Society podcast, not for anybody else. Over the past 15 to 20 years, the SAF has done more than any other organization to get our rights back through the Heller case, through the McDonald case, through the Excel case, through a lot of the places you're going in through the courts. Talk about the SAF and talk about what membership in the SAF does for the member and what their membership dues go for.
Well, they get a lot of bang for their buck. That's for sure. You know, we have like 30 active lawsuits in federal court going on right now to protect or extend gun rights. And basically, at this point, all the case law that everybody uses, no matter what group files a lawsuit, all the citations are Second Amendment Foundation victories.
Of course, and we want to know what's next, and you can't tell us.
Well, some of it we laid out here. Our new urban initiative to bring the gun rights battle back into the inner cities is sort of new. You're seeing some things where we're getting involved more in medical and mental health issues. There's a couple new things that I'm not quite ready to talk about. Not that I want to hold them back, but we're really close to a whole new project. But we have some partners involved with us that haven't quite signed up yet. And until they do, I don't want to announce it.
Alan, I did have one question. What did it take in the Seattle lawsuit to bring together Second Amendment Foundation, National Shooting Sports Foundation, and the NRA as co-plaintiffs in one lawsuit?
Yeah, that's something I'm really proud of because it's the first time it's ever happened. And basically what happened is we were set up to do this lawsuit. We sued Seattle once before when they tried to ban firearms in public parks, and we won. We had the law firm set up that won our last suit to do this one. And by the way, in that suit, the NRA was also a partner with us, but NSF was not. And all the gun stores in Seattle, we had them lined up and signed up as plaintiffs. And what happened is Larry Keene from NSSF, National Sports Foundation, sent me an email, which he copied to the NRA, saying that they're thinking about getting involved, you know, and filing a suit. And I emailed back saying, hey, we already have the suit written. We already have all the plaintiffs, some of which are your members of the gun stores in Seattle. We welcome you to be a plaintiff with us. And likewise, the NRA, who's copied on this and explained its attorneys the NRA are familiar with, you were all welcome to join. And it took, you know, just a few days, and oh yes, we're on board.
That is great.
Well, we do have to run. We got another guest coming up, but before we go, people should be. I mean, it's $15 for 1 year or $150 for a lifetime membership.
Yeah, we get yelled at by some of our people about that because it's so cheap. Our logic is we want to bring people in the front door. We want to just get them active and involved. We'll figure out how to fund the operation other ways. So the membership dues don't really fund our full operation, but it's important for us to get as many people involved as possible. So I think we're the cheapest of every gun rights group out there.
So if somebody wants to become a member, Second Amendment Foundation.org?
SAF.org.
SAF.org. Well, Alan Gottlieb, I do want to, again, thank you so much. Thank you for putting on the conference. Thank you for coming in and talking to us on the show.
Well, thank all of you guys for getting the word out and reaching the masses. Thank you very much.
You bet. We are getting set up for our next guest here. He'll be coming in just a second. Again, Dr. John Lott is going to be our next guest, and we're just waiting for him to. He's shaking hands and finishing some things up, and we will be going with him in just a minute. Alan Coren walks by. So
Can
anyway.
you imagine, I would be hard pressed to manage this conference. Can you imagine trying to just manage 30 legal cases that are, you know, on which our gun rights, the right of self-defense hinges? That's an immense undertaking.
Well, this is quite a lineup of questioners here. I feel outnumbered.
You got you and Nikki.
Yeah, well,
We're
Nikki
feeling
should be
outnumbered.
down here.
All right. Dr. John Lott joins us. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Lott.
He's signaling that he wants you to get a chair.
You want to sit here and climb in?
No, I'll get a chair.
Okay.
All right. We're apparently Nikki Gozer is going to be joining us as well. She is with Dr. Lott and kind of live radio happening as we speak here. So
Put on your ear so you can hear something.
I can hear.
okay. All right. We're good. And we got pictures galore going on and just live radio, folks. There's not a lot. We're kind of doing things on the fly here. So
on the part of Bloomberg and others to use research coming out of schools of medicine and schools of public health that are anti-gun?
Well, I mean, they're helping fund a lot of these studies. So them and other groups. I mean, it's really after the beginning of 2013. You had President Obama in January 2013 meet with the heads of 23 large healthcare foundations, and he said, "Look, we've won the healthcare debate. The issue now is to go and move on to gun control." And he basically got these large foundations to agree to now, instead of using their resources to push for government health care, to go and use them to go and push for gun control. And so that's what they've been doing, and they put a huge amount of money into this. And you know, they were saying it would take a few years before we would start seeing the bulk of their research comes out. But that's what we're going to be seeing this next year, and what we're starting to see now.
Dr. Lott, somebody described gun control as being analogous to climate change, meaning you'll get the results you fund. And if you wanted to get anti-gun results, all you'd have to do is, it almost doesn't matter who you initially ask to do a study. You just keep funding the ones that give you the answers you want.
Right. Look, there's research that I think is basically done right. And then there's other research where you know that people did strange things that in order to get the results that they wanted. So as I tried to talk about earlier today, and that is, if people leave out a lot of data, they better have a good explanation for why they're doing it. When I do a study, I use all the years, all the states that it's available for. But we're in 2015. If somebody uses data up through 2005, you wonder, why did you do that? Or if you use data from 30 of the counties in the United States when there's 3,140, you have to say, well, guys, why did you pick those counties? Is it obvious that you would pick those counties? And so
So you think they cherry picked the data to get the results they wanted?
yeah, I think well, I mean, as I demonstrated in the study on Connecticut on licensing of guns, they say there are 10 states that have these types of laws. Well, you look at all 10 states, and what you do is you put together what we call a panel data set, where you're seeing how crime rates change in those states relative to the ones that didn't change their laws. And if you have enough different states changing their laws in enough different years, you can begin to disentangle the different factors that can affect crime rate. If you only have one experiment, it's really hard to control for even a tiny fraction of the factors that could affect this. And I mean, there's so many issues here. So let's say I have 10 states, and in 8 of them the crime rate goes up, and 2 that it goes down. Well, would I just pick one of the 2 that goes down and say, look, it had the effect I wanted? Mm-hmm. But it's even more complicated than that. So, for example, they say the crime rate went down, and they're kind of looking at before and after averages. What they leave out is that the crime rate started falling before the law changes. And so, if the crime rate's falling before the law and it's falling after, well, of course, the after average is going to be below the prior average that's there. But it doesn't seem like it really had any impact from the law because it was already falling beforehand. And so, it's just so many obvious things that I would think any reasonable study would try to break out. Few people go and measure things just in terms of before and after averages. Few people that I know of would go and just pick one state when you have 10 states that change the law. Few people would say, well, I'm just going to end it at 2005. And then you say, well, why did they end it at 2005? What happens if I add one more year? And you find, well, if you added one more year, the results reversed. And so it just, those types of things, I've been around the track enough times. I just don't believe those things are by accident.
Well, we in North Carolina saw the research from Daniel Webster of Hopkins. In ads, when we were trying to get rid of the pistol purchase permit system, they ran ads and editorials from him saying, well, when Missouri got rid of theirs,
Well, why
the
didn't
crime
you
rate,
guys use the stuff I'd written up in response to that?
because I don't think we had the money to advertise the way Bloomberg
No, but
did.
I mean, you could have written letters to the editor and stuff if you say they're editorials and stuff, right? Did anybody use the stuff that I put together on that?
I have no idea, to be honest.
I didn't see anybody using it. So, I mean, it's just a question of why, that's the reason why I put the stuff together. In the Missouri case, again, you're picking one state. And the thing is, they were claiming the crime rates went up afterwards, but they were going up twice as fast before the law changed. And it's interesting, Missouri was one state that adopted the law and got rid of it. Why only look at what happens when you get rid of the law? Why not look at what happens when they adopted the law? Well, I know why they didn't look at it, because it got the opposite result of what they wanted to have. That's the type of cherry picking that, even gives cherry picking a bad name on this stuff. And it's just, but, you guys, if it were me and I was involved in that, I would have written massive letter campaigns whenever anything like that came up. And then that would embarrass people enough that they would think twice before using that. I mean, they may want to use something, but if it's something that's so flagrantly wrong and biased there, I don't understand why you guys don't use the stuff.
I use it in Texas.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. Actually, your statistics.
I'm not saying my stuff. I'm just saying
Right.
specifically on this stuff.
Right.
I don't think I've met John Locke.
Rachel Malone.
Okay, nice to meet you.
Your data is actually what convinced me to become a gun rights activist instead of fighting against guns, and I've used it extensively in testimony in the Texas House and Senate.
Wow.
And many activists there have that. In fact, that's why we are where we are in Texas, is because of your statistics.
Oh, well, thanks. That's
John, I hate to pull you short, but you don't take money from the large gun organizations.
We don't need money from small gun organizations.
You guys are fierce about your independence.
Well, I mean, I just don't think. Would it be nice to get more money? Sure. I mean, we operate pretty much with shoestring right now.
Well, but you're looking at the people who can give it to you. Who and how can they donate?
Well, they go to our website at crimeresearch.org, and there's a donate button at the top that people can do, and it's those types of small donations that make it so that we can function and do the type of research that we're just talking about.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Greatly
Thank you.
appreciate it. Nice to meet you.
Thank you.
So you were involved in the campus carry stuff a lot?
Okay, we got one more guest coming up here in just a second. We're doing the shuffle here.
Still, okay.
And we're going to be welcoming in Doug Ritter of Knife Rights in just a second here.
Be in touch.
We're going to get things set up here. And everybody getting ready to go. And I'm going to bring the mic.
Wear a headset worn by Nikki Gozer.
There you, I'm jealous. All right. Doug Ritter, Knife Rights, thank you again for joining us. We're of course back here at Gun Rights Policy Conference 2015. Been a while since we've talked. We've had some victories in Texas since I believe you were last on our airwaves. And what else has been going on?
It's been a pretty busy year for Knife Rights. We've got our preemption bill in Texas. as we've discussed previously. We've passed switchblade ban repeal in Maine. We passed switchblade ban repeal in Nevada. We passed preemption in Oklahoma, along with it's now legal to carry a switchblade concealed in Oklahoma. We still have 3 bills that we're working on in Illinois, Michigan, and Wisconsin. The Wisconsin bill is turning into a complete, full knife reform bill with preemption. And this week has been fantastic. I mean, we won our appeal in the Second Circuit in our lawsuit against New York City and DA Vance Jr. I mean, that is incredible. And then to come here to Gun Rights Policy Conference and hear 2 other attorneys say that they're planning to use that decision in their own gun rights cases just makes it an even sweeter victory.
Now, and of course, we want to know all the things you're going to announce in media releases next week that you really can't tell us. But what sort of things are you working on?
As you know, we don't comment on our future
Ongoing
plans.
literature.
But having said that, I think you can see more of the same. I mean, we are planning on working in numerous states next year, states that we didn't finish this year, new states where opportunities have arisen. The lawsuit in New York City is now back on track, so we will be working towards actually getting to the merits of that case. You know, we just have so much going on, and then add on top of that this ridiculous ivory ban stuff that we've been working on at both the state level and at the federal level. Monday at midnight Eastern time, comments are due on the federal proposed rule. So literally I've been out at our table when I haven't been in here working on those comments, because it's a very, very complicated rule with the federal government breaking all kinds of its own laws that were designed to exactly to stop the abuse that we are seeing from Fish and Wildlife Service.
With regard to the ivory ban, what exemptions are they planning, if any, in the bill?
It's not a bill. You have to understand it's a rule. And while there are exemptions for 200 grams of ivory and a bunch of other exemptions, they don't tell us what documentation is going to be required. With much of this ivory that's pre-ban ivory in the United States is perfectly legal today, there is no documentation that exists because none was ever required. So effectively, you're buying a pig in a poke, and there's no possible way to provide documentation because it never existed in the first place. I mean, the Fish and Wildlife, the Director of Fish and Wildlife Service has stated categorically that they plan to end commercial sale and trade of ivory in the United States, with very, very few exceptions. And this is going to, I mean, basically it's a stealth taking of firearms and knives. I mean, it's not just knives that are impacted.
I mean, we've seen customs agents break musical instruments because, it was an unidentified biological material. It was a piece of bamboo, you knucklehead, and so, and this gun had ivory on it. We'll seize it.
Well, I mean, Fish and Wildlife Service says, well, we haven't explained all the do's and don'ts because we want leeway to provide some degree of discretion on the part of Fish and Wildlife Service. What that means is they want to be able to abuse individuals who cannot afford possibly to fight the federal government. I mean, that's the bottom line. They have to tell us what's in the rule before they pass the rule.
In addition to the Fish and Wildlife Service, you mentioned states. What states are involved in this as well?
Oh, man. There were over a dozen states this year. Oregon, Washington, California, Maryland, Nevada, Florida. I mean, and we won everything but California. We won everything but California. And I mean, what can you say about California? It's California.
It's tough to win.
Can you just give me a little bit more detail on the Illinois bill? Is that just concealed carriers, and is it just automatic knives? Is that?
That's correct. It's just concealed carries. It's just automatic knives. That's not a position that we would normally take in most states, but it is Illinois,
Right,
and that
right.
is a significant advance for a state that just recently got concealed carry for firearms. So
Right, right.
we will take what we can get and come back later and try to get more, as
Right.
we should.
Right. Well, once again, let us know your website where people can sign up for your newsletter. That's where I first found out about it, because there's really no place else to get that information. So tell us about your website. And,
It's
are you taking
kniferights.org.
donations?
Kniferights.org. We're happy with donations. I implore you, go to kniferights.org by Monday, read the article about the ivory ban, and please submit a comment. We've made it very easy for you to do that. It will make a difference.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Okay, we've got one more guest coming up, and
great.
we're getting set here to do. We again, when we do the guest changes, takes a few seconds to get things done. It's not like a podcast where I can just edit things and it kind of magically flows. We've got a little bit of back and forth and forward and back we got to do in order to get everybody lined up. So we are right now. Dr. John Lott is Dr. John Lott. Dr. John Adine. Goodness, I can't even think. It's been a busy conference.
Sorry, that's smart.
Dr. John Adine has just sat down, and great speech or great talk up at the podium today, man.
Thank you.
You got quite wound up.
That's me usually anyway.
Yeah,
you guys know that. I don't have a hard time getting fired up.
Well, I mean, basically what you said is your complacency will get people killed.
Oh, it will. In fact, I've been saying this all along. I mean, whether it's a lone attacker or an active shooter thing, or whether it's an organized attack, hospitals are soft targets and they're woefully prepared.
You deliberately made a very careful statement when you said most hospitals are gun-free zones. Which hospitals are not?
It depends on state laws.
Well, they exist, though.
Yeah, there are some. There definitely are some, but in the state of Texas, they're all gun-free zones because it's actually legislated that way.
Well, I didn't know that there were any states that would allow staff
I think
to be
actually New
armed.
Jersey may have that law, but nobody can get a concealed carry license.
Well, so
it doesn't make a difference.
that's how many ice cubes are dancing in hell, right?
Exactly.
But seriously, are there states that other states besides New Jersey that might allow?
I mean, I'm not sure because I haven't looked at all the laws in all the states. I have to deal with my reality in my little piece of the world.
Well,
but I also know that there's a lot of other states where it's the same way.
The reason I ask is if there was one counterexample, then everybody should go here.
Yeah.
Here's what you're afraid of, and there hasn't been a problem.
Yeah, exactly. And the issue is really, if they're all gun-free zones, it's what's the weight of law? Is it like Texas where there are severe punishments, or is it like Pennsylvania where it's kind of a suggestion? Okay, and where it may be a trespassing thing rather than a firearms possession, Class A misdemeanor with $1,000 fine and a year in jail, like it is in Texas. Yes, and potential loss of medical license in my case.
Right.
So this is the position they put me in. If I want to protect myself, do I break the law and risk all that stuff to protect myself, or do I have to disarm myself every time I walk into a hospital building because I know that if somebody sees or suspects or whatever, and especially me, because people know I'm the gun guy.
You were the guy.
Yeah. So if they're gonna randomly search somebody, it's gonna be me. So can I take that risk? I don't know.
I figured that's why you were wearing the cargo scrubs.
Yeah, I always wear cargo scrubs. Yeah. So right now, at least we got that knife preemption law, so I can carry my knife at least anyway. So at least that's the one thing I can do legally now.
Or you could always carry a scalpel.
That's true.
So, Dr. Dean, since we're both in Texas, I'm assuming we're going to be working together in the next few years.
Oh, absolutely.
Getting gun-free zones. Are you getting fired up just sitting here listening to all other states and hearing their reports?
Absolutely.
Me too.
I don't have any problem getting fired up when it comes to this kind of stuff.
This conference has been very inspiring, just to get back to Texas and to make some more things happen there.
Absolutely. And, you know, I came out to your how to testify
Yes.
in front of the legislature class.
Right.
So I'm definitely all fired up. The only problem I have is that the notice happens so short term that it makes it difficult for me I can't cancel 45, 50 patients within a day or two in order to free up my schedule.
Exactly.
Well, I mean, that would strain a partnership to go, hey, I know you were planning tomorrow off. By the way, I've got 3 ops and a full book. I'm not going to be there. Would you cover for me?
Yeah, no,
Right.
that's not going to fly.
No.
The first year that I worked on Open Carry, it was basically just myself going down to the Capitol. The next session when I came back, my emphasis was on training many others to come. And so even on the days
Anybody else?
when I couldn't go, I still had sometimes dozens of activists, or at least multiple activists down there testifying. Is that a path that you've considered for next session?
Yeah, well, I think that will be useful. I mean, the DRGO organization, we can't get political because of our tax situation, but as individuals, we certainly can be activists. And several of the things that I'm planning on doing. One is working with Dr. Donna Campbell, who is my state senator, who is an emergency room doctor, and also with Drew Springer's office.
Yes.
Because he's the other guy who. I mean, I love his 695 law. That actually gave us teeth to force the hospitals to put armed security at each entrance to the hospital if you put your guns-free zone sign up.
Yes. So he's filed a gun-free zone bill 2 sessions in a row now. But this past session was a much better bill, much stronger, and gained more traction. So I'm expecting more. I know Open Carry was a huge hot button issue this past session. I'm hoping that gun-free zones takes more.
Right. I think gun-free zones in general are just horrible. Okay.
Yes.
We know. I mean, Massad Ayoob. He says they're was it the
hunting grounds for
psychopathic murderers?
Yes.
I was sitting next to him when he said it, and I'm like, "Holy smokes, boy, are you right?" And gun-free zones are just they're.
Well, one thing I wondered, a lot of people make unscheduled trips to the hospital, and as carry becomes more and more common, they're going to arrive with their firearm.
Oh yeah.
So how does security deal with a firearm that rolls in on a gurney?
Yeah, well, I think usually EMS deals with that, and
Not
often
you.
the police are at the scene of the accident. So usually the police probably take charge of the firearm. However, if the person's unconscious and they don't do a thorough search and they can't, sometimes they can roll in there. But they have security at the hospital too, and a lot of those guys are actually former military. I talk with a lot of them, even though they're not all armed, but they know how to use firearms.
Let me ask you a question about your organization, Doctors for Responsible Gun Ownership. Is it just limited to physicians?
No, not at all. In fact, we want nurses, we want emergency technicians, we want people who work in hospitals in general. We really want. In fact, several nurses came up to me right afterward and said, "I'm glad you talked about that. I'm a nurse." I said, "Well, join us. We want your input. We want nurses. We want pharmacists. We want anybody who works in a hospital. They're at risk."
I'm sure we all know people who work in hospitals, and I think we can do our part by speaking to them about your organization and about the dangers of working in a place where they are disarmed victims.
Exactly.
Well, that's a great segue. If somebody is in the medical field, how do they get in touch with Doctors for Responsible Gun Ownership? How do they become members?
Yeah, we're on drgo.us, and you can. There's actually a page where you can just hit the button and apply right there. We ask $35. It's a donation to SAF essentially, but you don't have to pay anything if you don't want to. But we ask $35 just to help with keeping the costs and keeping things running. And we, as you heard before, we, do a couple of blog posts a week, and plus we comment on stuff as it comes up on Facebook.
Very, very cool. Well, Dr. Adine, again, thanks. You're a friend of the show, man. You've been on the show as a co-host before, as a guest several times. Thanks again for coming on the air with us.
It's my pleasure, as always. It's always good to see my friends.
Very, very cool. Well, we're going to wrap up here in just a second. We got to let everybody know that tomorrow morning, the call to order is 8:50 a.m. Pacific time. We're going to go on the air 30 minutes before that. So that means we're going to be going on the air at 8:20 a.m. Pacific time. Do the math yourself. That's going to be 10:20 a.m. Central time and 11:20 a.m. on the East Coast. Folks, it's been a blast, an absolute honor, and total amount of fun to be doing the Gun Rights Policy Conference here. And day one is wrapping up. We'll be coming at you tomorrow for day two. Stay tuned and check AmmoLand, check PoliteSocietyPodcast.com/live, and we'll come at you then. Until tomorrow, everybody, stay safe, be aware, and we'll see you down the road.